Η αυτή είναι ένα πρόβλημα γιατί she's not responsive, she's not responding. Καλό ήταν που την έβαλες για να για να σώσει, αλλά δεν το έκανε γιατί έπαιξαν τις εκλογές. Εγώ ήθελα να σας βγάλω ένας άλλος.
We're going to start. We're not going to do anymore. The delay is enough.
Και αυτό είναι.
Good morning. Thank you all for coming here today. We are absolutely touched by your undiminished interest, and that is the force that keeps us going. Yesterday, we had some very interesting and brainstorming discussions from our speakers, and I would like to thank Ms. Ifigenia Kanara, Dr. Adigoni Papadimitriou, Ms. Marina Hatsopoulos, Dr. Lauren J. Simons, Dr. Emmanuel Stefanakis, and Dr. Doris Sommer for the creative and amazing team-building workshop. Today, we will continue our conference with Dr. Christos Georgakis, a professor of chemical engineering and director of the Systems Research Institute of Tufts University, and he will talk about can higher education and technology lead Greece to a brighter future. Don't forget that today we have also our contest winners presentation, surprise workshop by Philotimo Foundation, and of course, do not forget our invitation to you for our closing ceremony on Friday evening on the Greek Consulate General. Thank you very much. Dr. Georgakis, if you may.
With apologies for speaking in English, but that's easier. But I certainly.
That's what it's supposed to be.
Ah?
That's what it is supposed to be.
All right. So when I was first invited to this conference, I was wondering what I really can contribute and what I should talk about. Since my technical expertise are a little bit far removed from the problems Greece faces, I'm not a sociologist, I'm not an economist, I'm not a political scientist. But nevertheless, I thought that the group that was organizing the meeting was a very worthy group and a worthy cause. So I said maybe I should concoct something to talk about, and maybe I should talk about technology. I'm an engineer, and education. I'm an educator, and whether these can lead Greece to a brighter future. That was a daunting task, but at the end I managed to put some slides together. So if my talk fails to satisfy your expectations, I apologize ahead of time. But I thought I was educated in Greece as an undergraduate. I came to the United States freshly married for graduate studies. I started my career at MIT as an assistant associate professor, and then decided in the early 80s that I should go back to Greece and have a social mission. I was a full professor at the young age of 30-something in Thessaloniki. I was a member of the university before the big change in the university law, and I was a professor after the new change. So I had experiences on both sides. Fortunately or unfortunately, in 1983, I packed my bags and came back. And of course, I visited Greece very frequently since that time. I religiously go to Greece every summer, and lately for more than 2 months. So I cannot claim that I become an American. I'm still a Greek. And nevertheless, let's talk a bit about what I really want to tell you. I want to tell you about the 21st century capital. And of course, I'm not going to tell you about the capital of the 21st century, a very well-known recent book by Thomas Piketty that has been discussed quite a bit, nor am I going to tell you about that capital of the previous century. So neither of the two. So I'm going to talk to you about education, information, and technology, and whether this is the new capital, which to some extent it is the new capital, but whether it has an application in the framework of Greece. Can it lift to a better state of affairs? And I'm not going to give you an answer, either positive or negatively. I'm just going to motivate the question, and I'm going to let you individually decide. I think we should have hope, but that hope and aspiration should be moderated by some humility and some facts and some pragmatism. Let us look at some examples, both of technology and briefly about universities. Does anybody know this company? Does anybody know? No? Nobody? Huh? Wait. Absolutely. I used their application in order to arrive bright and early at 8 o'clock in this building, being afraid to be late from the western part of Newton. It is an Israeli company that developed an app for my iPhone or any other phone that tells you which way to go, has traffic on it, tells you whether there's a policeman waiting for you in the corner or there is a leftover track and everything else. And it optimizes you. I use it every day when I go to my office, and not necessarily to tell me which way to go, but to tell me whether it's traffic and us to have an alternative. That company, and that's the important part, was bought by who else? Google, for more than $1 billion as a company that started in Israel, okay? A technology company. And of course, it did not use chemicals, it did not use, it used ideas, it used technical expertise, it used motivation, it used late night work. But let's talk about Israeli universities. Hebrew universities ranked as the 138th worldwide. There is a certain grading of universities worldwide, whether you believe it or not, whether it's accurate 100%, it is there. If you complain about it, tell me a better grade. Technion is 190. and Tel Aviv University 195. And I think to that extent, the high quality of universities in Israel have produced the appropriate environment, as at least this copy from a web declaration says, that justify or explain why Waze was developed and why Waze did something that was worth more than $1 billion. Some Greek examples. Do you know TaxiBit?
Yeah.
Okay. TaxiBit is a company that helps you like Uber in the United States or everybody else. I have not used it. I learned it a bit recently in order to hail a taxi. I don't know exactly how it works. It operates in Greece. Started in Greece, but it operates in Peru and Brazil. I don't know why, but nevertheless it does. And nowadays it operates in France, I believe, in Paris. It has not yet been bought for $3 billion by Google, but or Facebook or somebody else. But nevertheless, it's a good example. It has been founded by these young fellows, I guess 3 of them, and has been in the press quite frequently, and that's why I learned it. Does anybody know about this Greek company? Incredible Blue to some extent. No,
I've heard of it before.
you've heard of it. Well, I learned all these things recently in preparation for this. Here is a clipping from their website, and as I move through these clippings, tell me whether you discover what they do. Of course, I'm going to tell you at the end what they do. Here, the destinations that they service: Greece, Croatia, Spain, Italy, Montenegro, coming soon, and Turkey. What they do? Greek company. Huh? Here, huh?
Cruises.
Yeah. Well, not cruise. Well, close.
Is this something customized airport tickets?
Yeah.
You decide where you want to go when they.
No, no, I know. Here are all destinations that they have: Croatia, South, Central, North, Greece, Peloponnese, Turkey, Spain.
Sailing?
Yes. They arrange you sailboats, motorboats, catamarans, and motorsailors. Okay? Yes, they've not been bought for $1 billion, but maybe they will be soon. So we have examples. It has been founded by these fellows, and to some extent, some of them are university educated. This fellow is a graduate of computer science at TE in Thessaly. They put together, as you can see, they have experiences both inside and outside Greece. They put together something worthwhile, and they're pursuing their dream. Do you know about Raviki?
No.
What do they make? Horta. Exactly. They make olive oil, of course. They make trahana, wild greens, and what does it say here? Sun-dried food. Here are all the horta you can buy from them, and they supply almost all Greek restaurants. This lowly thing of agriculture, of making horta, is becoming a business if you have imagination. Do you know about this company, Singularity Lab, involved in some engineering, some computational things? I'm not quite sure I know all about them. As I said, most of these things, the number of startups in Greece, according to Endeavor Greece, there were 144 in 2014, 16 in 2010, a substantial increase. The figure is not overwhelming. An article in the Telegraph in the UK said, which I don't think is correct, compared to the 500 startups in the UK. Of course, if you compare 144 and 400, of course, it's not overwhelming, but wait a minute, I'm an engineer. I know some mathematics, especially division. Um, and the economists, I'll tell you the mathematics and the division, say that the venture capitalists, that Greece is in the cusp of a startup boom. Here's my mathematics. Population, the ratio of UK to Greece is about 5.8. The ratio of the startups UK to Greece is 3.4. So the number is impressive. Okay. Let's talk about the university scene. And I selected a few companies to make a comparison with Greece, of course. And first I start by the population of these companies. I selected Belgium, Denmark, Finland, Italy, Israel, Greece, Singapore. I was almost tempted to select Lebanon, but I thought maybe I should leave Lebanon aside. It is a comparable country. And in the previous website, you can find rankings of the different universities. And this is, let me just load it. This is Belgium, right? And the top university, which is the technical university, I believe in Leuven, is 82. Danish university is 45. Finnish university is 67. Of course, these are northern countries, which of course they have bad weather, so they have to go for powerful year round. Italian university is 182, surprisingly low for me, especially the University of Bologna, which is the first university in Europe. Singapore, 22, only 2 universities. Well, listen, numbers have uncertainty, and put whatever uncertainty. 22 plus or minus 22.
Can we put, for example, some British or American universities?
Yeah, I could.
I mean, University of Chicago is a good place, I understand, but must be some well-known US universities of the US that are well behind this rank. Right? Is that real? That's what concerns me.
You can take the data with any. Singapore University has, it's almost MIT subsidiary, right? Many of my colleagues at MIT, I don't find them here, say, sorry, I'm in Singapore for 6 months. So maybe it's 22. I was surprised that it's so low, right? But Quick University, 400. Okay. And here is the summary. Singapore 22, whether you like it or not. Scratch it if you don't like it. Number 1 is MIT in this list. Most likely, if I'm an engineer, might say Harvard or Princeton or and more broad universities, number 1. But nevertheless, take it with a grain of salt. No doubt there are individual excellences in Greek universities, throughout Greek universities. I know some of them, I'll tell them in a second, and I'm sure you know some as well. The chemical engineering department, I'm in chemical engineering Patras, is one of the best in Europe, or at least it used to be. The chemical engineering, we can talk about the chemical engineering department in Greece. I was not a faculty in Patras, although I'm a native of Patras. I was a faculty in Thessaloniki. Started with 3 very prominent faculty members in the late 70s, and it attracted lots of others and lost quite a few others. And we can discuss the ITE institutes in Greece, the only good thing that came out of the educational revolution in the 80s. And in Thessaloniki, Thessaloniki has a separate center of research institutes. The first one was in chemical process engineering, which happened to be the initiator of this institute before I packed up my bags and left, and it was established afterwards. Still there, attracted a lot of research. A professor whom I identify only with DT, the National Technical University, just became a member at, I would say, the young age of 50-something, of the National Academy of Engineering in the US, not a corresponding member, a regular member, in 2015. I can tell you what that is. And I'm sure you have several examples. But my point is statistics and exceptions indicate great variability. If the average is low, and we know excellent examples, that means the variation is quite high. Okay? And that's not what makes a good university. Right? It is the university system that is of importance here, not the bright stars. We know quite well any university in the US can be given a lot of money and can hire star professors, 2 or 3 or 4, but that does not change the university. Universities are very difficult to change, they're almost mountains. I'm a staff that like staff to be like Harvard, MIT, forget it, it's not going to be staff. If the institutions have inertia and not just change the by. So, the present startup companies and a few bright faculty are just a few flowers. Like this, or maybe this. Okay, maybe a group of them. They're just flowers, single flowers. But we need this, and this, and this. Well, of course, the dots don't make tulips. They don't make 1 or 2 or 10 tulips. They make millions of tulips in order to sell throughout the world, right? And when the French make perfume in the southern part of France, they don't have 1 square meter of lavanda. Right? They make miles. We need top quality education, of course, in elementary education, secondary education. Students in secondary education for many years have been organizing strikes and writing graffiti instead of their parents picking them by the ear and sending them home to study, not this graffiti. Okay? Whoops. What did I do wrong? Did I say something bad? Yeah, so something. And of course, the university needs to be as well. And of course, everybody says we have free education, the Orientadia. There is no Orientadia. Faculty have to be paid. They are being paid. They are paid indirectly. And I often advocated that Greek universities should institute a tuition payment, and that the government will give the students a check that represents the tuition payment, which then deposit to the university. And they do that for N+1 years, and after that they have to pay out of their own pocket. But these are things that do not lie on the earth. Well, of course. That's why we know what the answer to my first question is.
The very moment you do the total tuition, in fact, you said it, 90% of the fact that last year was selling out as an acquisition.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But they need to be paid higher salaries, right? And of course, students will be asked to evaluate faculty members, but they have no business in selecting who their professors are going to be, who their dean is going to be. When I was a faculty member in Thessaloniki in 1980-83, my students were telling me that they need to take the exams with open book. And I said, no, why should open book? Say everybody else is giving open book. I said, listen, if you give you open book, then you're going to be spending time turning the pages of the book. I said, I don't like open book, but I don't like closed book either, because you think that you're going to have to memorize. So you write 4 pages of whatever you want to write, effisimos phonai. And I say that in order to write these 4 pages, you have to determine whether that or the other is important and needed. And by writing the 4 pages, you organize your knowledge, and then the piece of paper is worthless because you organize your knowledge. was at the strike. I was the American capital. In the 80s. Yeah, I know. I know. I know. Okay? Because these people are the deputies in the parliament. First time I got them out, the first time they did it properly, I said, listen, I'm going to give it to you open book, provided that you sign the following declaration that we, the students of the 4th and 5th year, are people conservative, that only try something new until our, we're going to do only what our grandfathers did. It's not happening. Second time, the provider came in my office to box me out. So, listen, they have no logic, because the only way that they can influence the exam is for them to put the exam question. If the professor says open book, okay, open book, what's the problem with open book? And of course, one time said, give me a blank page, said, Professor, you had to know to write this. No, you had to know to do well in the exam. That was, he presented as a revelation out of the sky, that you have to know the subject to write the exam. These are the prime ministers. Now, of course, all Greeks should learn to speak Greek, right? You know that. Greeks know how to speak Greek? No, they don't. Nakanu made a break in TV. Graduate students should be in English, not in Greek. Why? In order to have a larger audience, in order to attract students from the neighboring countries, to educate them to impact their culture the same way that the United States and all British. And of course, when you write a PhD thesis, why are it in Greek? Who's going to read it in Greek? All the Dutch universities, the Danish universities, they don't appreciate the Dutch language or the Danish language or the Swedish language. Why the hell do they write all the PhD theses in English? Well, graduates should look for jobs globally. When somebody finishes the University of Florida, he's not looking for a job in Florida only. The market is the whole United States. When somebody finishes chemical engineering in Thessaloniki, why the hell are they going to be looking for a job in Thessaloniki or in Patras? They should be looking elsewhere if they're worth being employed there. But, well, maybe I'm preaching to the choir. Technology and education can lift us, yes. We have tourism, we have merchant marine and fish exports. More educated people can select better representatives. Every country deserves the government they gets. Of course, we compete. The action plan is to educate young people like the ones that started the startup companies. So with their ideas, energy, and hard work, we can see some possibilities. But what does it take to have a great university? And of course, I'm not giving you a picture of Harvard or MIT to tell you what a great university is. I'm giving you a picture of a garden. This picture of a garden. This picture of a garden. A university is like a garden. The value of the garden is not because somewhere here you have a very special flower, which is the most expensive flower that you planted. Single exception of the professor who is well known. The university is a garden because it has a lot of segments and all of them work as a system. Well planned, well harmonized. What does it take to have a great garden? Sure, you have problems. Good seeds, right? Fertile ground. Somebody to water and maybe fertilize. Someone to rake and till the ground. And, most importantly, somebody to pull thorns out of the garden, because otherwise you're going to have something like this. That the Greek university have all these aspects. We only talk about the good seeds, the bright students or the bright faculty. Does the university have a mechanism to take the weeds and the thorns out? Well, that's what you end up having. Okay, educating people are the necessary good seeds, fertile ground, often an increased academic and research environment, often an agile business and technological environment, watering, availability of research funds, ability to travel to have visitors, availability of venture capital on the business side, a business-friendly legal system which does not change every year, breaking and tilting the ground, the possibility to hire new talent, and removing the weeds, parting company with whomever is not fit. All these things are necessary, and they all have to be there in order. The seeds cannot solve the problem. Everybody says, there are so many good academics abroad. Why don't you come back in order to solve the problem? Well, the academics can come back and they will provide the seeds, but who is going to do the other parts? Who is going to do the last one? But Greece's problem is not just finance. Actually, it's not finance theory. Right? It is trust. If everybody takes care of their yard, I go to Greece in the Western Peloponnese in Kazakhstan, everybody takes care of their yard, it's clean. But on the pavement, on the garbage collection, there's a lot of garbage. Who wears it? Nobody wears it. Right? Everybody believes in the mechanical garbage. Whether it is the new mayor that we're going to elect, the new peripheryarchis, the new representative, and of course the new prime minister. We don't solve it. They will solve the problems, and they will tell us. All these problems will be there, even if you just take next and take the debt out tomorrow. But we're not faced that way. Yes. Well, if we're going to try to lift the fortunes, which we should, I'm not trying to be pessimistic. We should abolish a few wars. Never, yes. When I first went to Greece in the 80s, a lot of my both conservative colleagues in the beginning, before the PASOK revolution, were telling me, you don't know anything about Greece. Very much because kind of from abroad, you have ideas. You have not become part of it. You're different. Shut up. Actually, two very senior colleagues in the Saloniki, that was the time we had faculty of the whole engineering schools. And Γεωργάκη, μιλάτε πάρα πολύ. Είμαστε και εμείς πρώτη φορά καθηγητές και δεν μιλάγαμε και τόσο. Συγγνώμη, η γυναίκα μου φτιάχνει καλό πρωινό. What else can you tell? Of course, when PASOK came and I was talking since I had some relationships with the Minister of Technology, Yanis, if you remember, all the PASOK underlings who said, forget about axiokratia. First, we'll level everything up, and then axiokratia. So everybody who comes in wants to level what the previous people did, and then start from zero, and at the end we're done. We have to accept as a minimum societal contract. What are we? Are we a Western democracy or something else that will be unique and will teach the rest of the world what our country is organized? Each government should build on the efforts, respect what the others did, instead of just taking a new law and scraping everything to ground zero. It happens every few years. It's going to happen now with the university progress will be slow. We must be steadfast and patient. I hope we can. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yorvakis. Questions to Dr. Yorvakis, because you have a delay in the schedule, can wait, I think, for until the next speaker. So you keep your questions and you comment later.
Any burning questions? Just one? No. Good.
We'll continue our schedule with Dr. Daniel Eisenberg, Professor of Entrepreneurship Practice, Babson College Executive Education. He will talk about driving economic growth through entrepreneurship ecosystems.
Thank you. I apologize if this is going to be relatively short. Well, I'm going to say okay. I don't know what I said okay to, but I said okay to something.
Accept the terms and agreement.
This will be relatively short. I'm going to introduce myself, but it's really special for me to be here. I spent 5 years in this building between 1976 and 1981. I would always sit in that chair right there. Sorry? I didn't leave it empty. And the reason I would sat just like you did, because I could make a quick exit if the lecture was boring. But it brings back mostly good memories. Being there, and I taught it last year, but I did my PhD in social psychology. For 5 years, 5 long years. And so very quickly, I'm not an expert in Greece. The only reason I was asked to come here is because I was in Greece last week and would have met some of the speaking and also sort of semi-vacationing. It was actually a very interesting experience. I've been to Greece quite a few times. And the other important thing about Greece is that I started my first childhood, as far as we can tell. Almost certainly, my first childhood started on Zakynthos. It also has a special. Is there a clicker? Clicker? So just quickly, I did spend 11 years afterwards in this institution. I have some feelings about academia as well as Dr. Georgiakis. Close. Sorry about that. And then I lived in Israel for 22 years, and just being a faculty member, professor, lived in Israel 22 years. That may actually be a little bit relevant, especially the previous presentation mentioned that little bit venture capitalist, entrepreneur, angel investor. I wrote a book, and this is a very short version of the talk I gave at Nova Athens last week. I don't know if any of you have been to the building they have in Nova Athens. It's really impressive. They took an old oil tank
It was converted into a museum, and then they converted it into an innovation center. And I personally found that impressive. So I'll just use a few of the slides from that talk, and we can perhaps have a conversation. But my expertise is entrepreneurship, and as having been an entrepreneur and I'm an active angel, an active investor in companies. Today, I was a venture capitalist, a formal venture capital fund, and for the last 6 or 7 years, I've been involved in the relationship between entrepreneurship and economic development. Some of the previous comments directly relate to what I do every day of the year now. So for the last 6 years, we've been actually conducting projects in regions around the world to rapidly stimulate economic growth in new ways. And the initial results after a few years of call it experimentation, it's intervention work. It's not advising, and it's not theorizing, and it's not research. It's actually intervention work. We have some initial indications that it works, and it works very initial indications, emphasis, that it works, and it works very efficiently. So just imagine, and you can apply this, the people that I spoke with last week applied it obviously to Greece. And it's a little different a viewpoint of the relationship, or the implicit relationship between entrepreneurship and economic growth. But because the dialogue, I think the helpful dialogue around entrepreneurship isn't around startups. And it's a little bit, so not just the semantic difference, I think the substantive difference as well. Again, put in perspective that most of my investments in startups, I started companies, my kids start companies, a lot of my friends, we made money doing this, but I think the relationship between startups and economic development is very, very shaky. And if anything, it's the other way around. Economic development drives startups and not the other way around. And if at all, there's also potentially a negative relationship. But just imagine a situation, again, just to be quick, I'll allow you can read these things. But imagine a region, a city, 500,000 people, that 3 years after intense work or 4 years after intense work, you actually see things happening. You see companies growing, you see investors investing, banks improving their loan portfolios, universities changing the research, you're writing cases on success. I think I heard it for the first time also, some of the same companies you mentioned when I was in Greece last week. Imagine you hear not just of these companies, but of dozens of these companies. They're exporting. One of the interesting things about the Greek, let's call, for the sake of a better word, startup scene, is that a lot of them are exporting or doing business outside of Greece. For no other obvious reason than the purchasing power is fairly low right now. And I think that's a very interesting sign, very similar to Israel 30 years ago, in the sense that all the markets were outside for different reasons, but all the markets were far away. I think that's important. So imagine this, and in fact, that's what we've been doing. So one of our projects has been in a low middle income Colombian city called Manizales, 500,000 people. You can't read that. That's just to show that there's a fancy infographic. This you probably can read. We see in Manizales, after 3 years of intense work with teams of people there, that in fact companies are growing and banks are lending and exports is happening and the reputation is changing. The belief that we can do things, levels of aspiration and the culture are changing. These are all tangibly, measurably changing, not just in theory. Then a project that we're doing now in Milwaukee, in Milwaukee, 600,000 people. It's not New York, it's not London, it's not Berlin. It's a second or what you would call second or third tier city. I'm not exactly sure I know what that means, but what most people would call not a top tier city. And that's what's interesting about it. And that's Wisconsin. And what you see is this is not just the result of our work, but this is a heat map of companies in the Milwaukee region that have between $1 and $10 million in revenues. There are actually about 15,000 companies that have, let's say, a median $2 to $3 million in revenues. It's a big stock of companies. And there in this project that you've been doing for a year and a half, you actually see these changes. Sorry, you actually see measurable changes. I was trained as a researcher. I was also trained how you can use numbers. You can manipulate numbers. I got pretty good at it. I worked as a consultant to the faculty and the students who were here. I was the consultant to the faculty, helping them save their research with statistics. So I realized these can be manipulated, but the numbers are actually pretty impressive of what can be done with the right ideas. And this is what, in just 10 more minutes, I hope to give you some ideas. I think they're applicable in many economies, and I think they're applicable, I think they're applicable in Greece as well. And so it's a method just in order to communicate. You simplify things to communicate. I realize life is complicated and economies are incredibly complicated. And again, I'm not proposing this as a panacea for anybody. And as an absolute non-expert in Greece, I'm not saying this is relevant. But if the idea is right, then I think there's probably merit in exploring it for countries with tremendous amounts of assets that are not being productively employed for many different reasons. So I distill this into the 5 Ps, just to make it simple, convenient, easy to communicate, and I'm happy to make this slide presentation available to you if you'd like. Is this the clicker? So this clicks up. Okay. Go like this. So the 5 Ps are place, potential, people, purpose, and practicality. This is a framework. I just finished teaching a 3-day program for leaders from 10 countries around the world, which is a program I designed called Driving Economic Growth Through Entrepreneurship Ecosystems. And we use this, again, admittedly extremely simple framework for getting people to think in different ways about economic growth and its relationship to entrepreneurship. And the first is place. And countries, despite the fact that we talk about, you're talking, I guess, all week about Greece, and I'm sure you talk a lot about Greece because you care about it. And we talk about countries all the time. It's actually a very poor unit of analysis for almost anything to do with entrepreneurship, because the variability of entrepreneurship within countries is usually much, much greater than the variability between countries. And if you look around the world, Israel's a good example. Even within Israel, there are hotspots. In Boston, you go down the street towards Kendall Square, there's one building called the Cambridge Innovation Center. You go 2 miles further, and there's one area called the Boston Innovation District. I published a case on the regional development of the innovation district, and you see incredible concentrations of economic activity, primarily around technology, not only. And then if you go, say, 30 miles to the north to Lawrence, Massachusetts. Anybody? Are you from Massachusetts, or are you from? So Lawrence, Massachusetts. Oh, sorry. So this is Massachusetts. And these are those 2 regions I just mentioned. And Lawrence, Massachusetts, up in the north near New Hampshire, 150 years ago, a hotbed of industrial activity, leather, shoes, textiles, even they exported ice. And today it's, I'm exaggerating, and I don't know years from Lawrence. I've been there and I've done a lot of things there, but it's not you wouldn't call it a hotbed of anything in Lawrence today. And it's only 29 miles away. And then you go down to my hometown, Woods Hole, Massachusetts, which is about 80 miles to the south. That's where I'm going right now. We've got dozens and dozens of Nobel Prize winners and research institutions and all kinds of wonderful things. And the kind of intellectual activity that most nations would kill for. And since 1888, one company has somehow been created, somehow affiliated, or spun out of all this intellectual activity and scientific activity. So you have on the 30 miles to the north, you have a black hole, exaggerating, and 30 miles and 80 miles to the south, you've got, for some reasons, that's my home right there. 30 miles and 80 miles to the south, you have what I call an anti-cluster, a different kind of black hole. And then in the middle, there's all this stuff that's going on that's very important. I'm going to skip this slide. And secondly, and this is part of an economic development strategy, and that is if you want to have results in a relatively short period of time, again, with all the respect that I have, the love and the investment and the money I've made, the money I've lost in startups. They're a very, very, very long-term proposition. And they're very uncertain propositions. So that if you want to see the impact of entrepreneurship on any regional economic activity, the work has to be done in accelerating companies that already have revenues. And I don't know what the stock of those companies is around Athens, for example, or Thessaloniki, Patras, or other cities, but I'm willing to bet that it's hundreds of companies, if not thousands of companies, that already have had a lot of the market uncertainty and developed the operational uncertainty squeezed out of them. There's other kinds of uncertainty, but they can be accelerated very, very, very rapidly. That's what we've been doing in our projects. Again, I'll skip through this. In fact, this is actually kind of interesting. A study that was released by Dun & Bradstreet a couple of weeks ago showed that the vast majority of jobs that were created in the last 8 years in the United States came from companies that were $10 million to $1 billion in revenues. The notion that you've heard that startups create jobs is, in a word, unintentionally, of course, a misleading statement. Third, people, and again, a region, a stock of companies, and then a group of people. It's everywhere I've been, and I've done work in over 40 countries now, work meaning anywhere from talking to actual intervention projects over long periods of time. Everywhere I've seen anyway, there's a group of, in a region, a concentrated population, there are a group of 10 or 15 people who are the leaders. They may not be the officially appointed leaders. In fact, oftentimes they're not the officially appointed leaders. But they're the people that if they could get together in the room and decide that we have to move these chairs from here to there, those chairs would move from here to there. And it's a question of getting them together and getting them aligned around a specific idea and a specific objective. They may be bankers, educators, family business members. In fact, they are. They could be. In fact, one of our projects, two of our projects, we had priests involved who were very influential. And so again, just as a strategy, as part of the economic development, 5 Ps, let's call them, I'm going to give this to you. We're not going to talk about it. You can download this. It's all over the place. This is a very simple framework that I've developed. There's a much more complicated version of it, of course. I would be embarrassed of my doctor here at Harvard if I only had 6 bubbles and 6 words. But there's one with thousands of words on it. But this is a simple framework to think about entrepreneurship ecosystem that's become kind of the de facto standard in the field for thinking more broadly about an environment that encourages growth entrepreneurship. And what's the 10 to 15 people principle says these are not abstractions. Very often we'll hear consultants and economists in this great institution and the one down the street saying, what you should do is you should do this. And no one asks them, so who are you referring to when you say you? Who is that person that should do that? When you focus on specific regions around specific objectives, it's possible to put faces and names to that you. This map is just a way of thinking of all who those different views should be in around 500 to 1 million to 300,000 to 3 million person. We had 8 people from Rio de Janeiro in 3 days in our workshop. These were people that live together, work together, know each other, and together decided to do things, and that makes it possible. And this is just kind of a cute slide, so I'll show it. And this just illustrates the problem. The problem is that we all talk about entrepreneurship, but we have different images in our mind. Some people are talking about micro enterprises or the informal sector. Others are talking about innovation, others technology, others startups, others scale-ups. And unless you get them together in a room and aligned, I think maybe it's just obvious, just common sense, you're not going to move those chairs from here to there if some people think they're tables and other people think that you should move the floor. That's just an analogy that they made up. It may not be a very good one. Again, just skipping this is actually kind of an interesting purpose principle. Um, I was once invited to the White House. I know it sounds very straight to say it. When you get invited to the White House, you don't get invited to have beer with Michelle and Barack, it turns out. You get put into another nondescript building with security guards. It's gray. It has thousands of offices, but it's called the White House. And I learned that only because I went. But they launched something called Startup America 5 years ago. And I made the mistake of all the luminaries who were there. I advised them on it. And I made the mistake of asking a question, which is, how do you know when you're successful? How do you know when you've achieved enough of this stuff, American stuff, and be able to stop? And the blank stares in the room made me realize that I'd asked something very embarrassing. But it turns out there actually is this is a very rough rule of thumb. It turns out it fits all of the literature by coincidence. But it's a rough rule of thumb. If you take, for example, and I did actually go and get some, went online and I Googled and I downloaded. You see it. That it's roughly these number of companies a year in these regions. If you could get 5 companies, for example, in Patras, and that's just could be 6, it could be 3, but it doesn't have to be 20 a year, entering into more rapid growth trajectories, it will reach a tipping point. You keep doing that for a few years. That when you define something specifically, when we define something specifically and limit it regionally, it turns out that problems that are very complicated, when they're big problems, can become more tractable and manageable when they're broken down small. So this is not pie in the sky. And by the way, it fits Boston, the 60 per year in Boston. There are about 3,000 venture capital deals done in the United States, though as a whole, 300 million people. The numbers kind of work. And we have more rigorous data. And I'll just skip the quick wins, with the exception of saying only that as I said, I've been to a few dozen countries and cities within those countries, and I met with leaders from all of them. And inevitably, each one of them will have their own version of a closet with shelves on it with plans that are gathering dust. And some of them may go back 100 years of the 5-year plans or 10-year plans or the Vision 2020 or the Dream 2030, but somehow they never get realized, partly because in political cycles and in social cycles, the long run is always elusive. And so one of the things that we emphasize and helps to build a virtuous cycle is to focus on quick wins. You can actually take companies, and this is not, it's going to sound bombastic, but it's true. I've been teaching business now for a long time. You can actually take companies that already have revenues and help them grow by 20 to 25 to 50% more rapidly than they're growing now. Not all of them, but some of them more rapidly. And if you do that in a specific region and you get the leaders aligned, and it doesn't have to be in something innovative and with technological uncertainty, it can be shipping or tourism or some version of shipping and tourism or agriculture. It actually can reach a tipping point, because one of the things that we have learned, and it's again, I think maybe stating the obvious, is that growth is infectious in lots of ways. Rapid growth of companies, more companies growing more rapidly, it has benefits not just for those companies, it has benefits for customers, for bankers, for students, for professors, for public leaders, for the media. It has lots of benefits for lots of different people. And so when it starts happening in given regions, and my thesis is that it can happen intentionally, when it starts happening in given regions, it tends to become self-fulfilling. It tends to accrete. And we've seen this, as I say, the initial evidence is that this actually can happen. So, I don't know if this is at all related to what you're thinking about. But I was asked to speak, and this is what I know. This is one of the things I know to speak about. I can speak, I can also dance.
Get back.
Sorry?
Get back.
No, salsa. I'm very focused. So, I don't know if there's time for comments. I have to leave in just a couple of minutes. Go down to my black hole. I spent 5 days on Paros, writing and eating and drinking, and by the way, discovering the next. I mean, I collect wine, and so one of the things I do is I try to discover wines that are off the beaten path. Not yet. I get a lot of. Well, I found fantastic wines today, and I'm pretty fussy for 10 euros to buy a really, really good bottle of wine. And I think that's, if you ask the world, is there wine in Greece? Say, yeah, it's Retsina, you know, or whatever, or Ouzo, which is wine. But they're really, I think it's a question of scale. The vineyards are too small to really get. I think that would actually change maybe. That was very curious.
No, I already.
Single malt roast. Where? I don't know. The Nemea wines were good, and a few others, but that's not. But then you asked what I was doing, and then I talked for a day, if you know that. This, but we had more time. Amazing. And so one of the things that really impressed me, so I spent 22 years in Israel. One of the things about the entrepreneurs in Israel until 10 years ago is they were old. The entrepreneurs in Israel were not young people. We're not kids. The generation of entrepreneurs that built the entrepreneurs, the sort of revolution there, were 40-year-olds, 45-year-olds, 35-year-olds, 50-year-olds. And I was impressed that with the same age. I was expecting students, and I saw people who looked like me. Actually, they were a little younger than me. I'm flattered. But I think that was really, really impressive because they were mature. They understand the difficulties of building a real business. They understand that starting up is easy. It's scaling up that's difficult. We had conversations around this. That really impressed me. That was the only impression that I had. And of course, they had great conversations, great food, and so on.
You mentioned about the cluster that brings together companies and the workforce and so on. Do you believe that this cluster can be created from one individual, or it should be something like a general?
So I didn't use the word cluster. That's using different. Let's avoid that term. Leave that aside. Talk about concentration. Okay. And the answer is individual people can make huge differences. Huge difference. Whether it's 1 or 2 or 5, I don't know. In Israel, in Boston, you take 5 people. There are 5 people. You peel back. I like history. The older I get, the more history I like history. Go figure. And so I interview people, and people before they die. It's easier to interview them before they die. And in the 70s, there was a few bankers, a couple of professors who got people together and were connectors and investors. You know, without them, of course, it would have happened in Boston, but it would have happened differently. The same thing in Israel. In the 70s in Israel, there are 5, 6, 7 people, none of which is mentioned in this silly book, Startup Nation. None of them. Who really made a huge difference. I'm sure that's true. I think I met some of them in Greece. The power of in economics they call it demonstration effects. Demonstration effects are incredibly powerful, especially the smaller the tighter the region is. So if there's one person who has a big success in Athens, that could seem like 10, 20, 30 people if it's visible. Now, one of the challenges is to make sure that the success is visible. Because there's lots of reasons why we should. Not just the tax officials will want to be, security. I think security is a big issue there. I think taxes. I do have to go. I'm sorry, but I'm. You can Google me. My handle is Dan Isen, Dan Isen, or Dan@Isen.com. So pretty easy to find. So happy to talk to you. And good luck.
Thank you.
Sorry.
We can continue with the questions for Dr. Christos Yorvakis, which we are going to before. Do you have any questions for the speech of Dr. Yorvakis?
I couldn't agree more with what you said, and I totally agree that the problem of Greece is not about financing. Period. I strongly believe that. My concern is that the social problem that you mentioned is not something new. This has been around forever, I guess, since the 1821. I mean, I don't know, there is some articles. The same story. The only thing is that after the Second World War, I guess Greece, I mean, it had some kind of prosperity after the war, etc., etc. Then the European, we control the European Union, etc. And then those money came in, and all these problems were buried under this euphoria, I guess. And now that this is gone, now we see the truth. So I worry how deep in our DNA that these problems are, and how do we eradicate. I don't know. I'm not very.
It's an interesting comment, and at TAPS, maybe a year and a half ago with the visitor, at TAPS we have the Karamanlis there with the visitor from Greece, and the previous Karamanlis professor had invited the fellow at the University of Athens, whose name is Stavros. I gave a talk. And his talk to some extent left me with the following thing. At the end of the talk, I said, excuse me, I'm going to go home depressed because you told me that this Padirma, the economic crisis, is a periodic phenomenon, right? And it has happened 3 or 4 times a year. Could you please tell me that this is not so I can speak a little bit less? He answered me, he didn't answer straightforwardly, and I understand that. And I recommend that you read his book, which I read last year. His book is called Τα κακομαθημένα παιδιά της ιστορίας. He has a very nice exposition of what has happened in the Greek history about the ups and downs, and to some extent, it's not DNA, but it is. A relative of mine said that there was someone who said that in Greece there was a collapse of the concept of city, like in Italy. In Italy, in Venice, there was a city, right? There was somebody who was running Venice, somebody in Florence who was running Florence. In Greece, there was nothing of that sort. At least if there was something in the Middle Ages, it kind of collapsed. I don't remember exactly where to put it. And then we see that locally there is not a sense of ownership of the area. When I am from Patras, my wife is from Pyrgos, with a small summer home in Katako. And Pyrgos has a constant problem with garbage. And last year, I don't do that. I had to write an article in the newspaper said, that forget about the ministry, forget about everything else. Let's get the and the Google test. Now let's try to solve the problem. Let's ask for everybody to give 5,000 euros, 10 euros. Everybody thought that was because everybody expects the minister to give us money. Give us money so we can pay enough of those who pay the government. And then okay, so what? So I don't think it's the problem. But of course, the only hope is that when we see each individual Greek being transplanted away into another system, we all have flourished. Flourished quite greatly. Now we take the same person and you put it back, we don't. It's a systems problem. It's not an individual problem. It is a systems problem, right? When I was in Greece and I was asked to do a certain research project, we get about $1 million from NATO, but Greece had to put another. I went to Ilianis, who asked me to do that, and he wanted me to take the whole thing, but of course the money was going to come from the And they was reporting to the Minister of Energy. So I said, listen, this guy wants to split it left and right. You want me to take the whole thing? Get together with the minister, decide, tell me what to do. Either way, I'll be perfect. No, they didn't. So my lesson was there is not decision making. Right? I mean, the two ministers could have gone there, armrest, make a decision. I don't care. Of course, Sanders would have lost. But move forward. Let the other guys. At the end, nobody did it. The possibility of getting $1 million to do some research on lignite, after we have saved Greece, but it's a small thing. Was close. So it is a systems problem. Now, of course, I'm biased. I'm a systems person, but nevertheless, it's obvious. I told you the garden. Right? You see the garden; it's beautiful, not because it has a flower in the corner. It's the whole system. Somebody takes out the focus.
Yeah, if I can add, just for focus, dear friend was in charge of the assessment committee. Again, my department, history, I hope, German, so the
You read
success,
some.
absolutely. So, not only the success of the thousands of personal risks in the United States and the democratic environment clearly answers my good friend from here. That is not a deal. But we do lack, and I can say that after busting my chops 20 years back in Greece, is we do lack inclusive institutions. Institutions, in other words, that sustain a level playing field based on meritocracy with checks and balances. This is what the country again and again doesn't have. I listen very carefully, and for humans also, I'm very passionate about this, but you talk because we understand firsthand that without a dramatic change in the Greek educational system, cannot have growth. We can talk during lunch break. We have, instead of moving forward, we have a new bill for education actually that takes us decades. So the challenge that I pose to myself and a lot of my good, very successful US excellence-based professors is make it go back and make it. I dare you to go there. 3 days that Professor Kofopoulos came to the department, I had to ensure that the process of assessment was not interrupted when political parties and students came to our assessment. I mean, Professor Yacob to take it personally, but we're not going to allow the assessment to take it. I thought that ain't going to happen under my words. And I did what I had to do to ensure that the process was successful. Does it take energy? It kills you. I give you one final example that I'm going to shut up. Only 2 weeks ago, the provost calls the faculty senate. You know what is the first thing that is discussed? The Ministry of Education will seize all the funds that we have the research committee. And it seized them and put them in 3 months records on the Ethnic Trapez the Central Bank of Greece, which is an annex of the European Central Bank. So when I raise my hand and I ask, what will happen to the European projects? Forget about the national money. I don't want it. We need to lose anything. The comment that I got is, this is the only thing that you care about? I said, absolutely yes. Because that jeopardizes what we built with our European partners, with the European Commission, blood, sweat, and tears for 10 years.
How long have you been in Estonia?
So here,
You are my hero. I only stayed 3 years, and lots of my
be
friends
careful what
stayed.
you're telling me. So many people tell me, I'm surprised that you're still here, so I might follow their advice. This is situation.
Well, I live here for 3 years, and I live for another 30 years watching my friends. I was not a hero in that moment. But some point you decide what it's like to fight.
You cannot do so long.
El profesor Jacobo Fernández stayed for marriage, so that for some years in Florida.
Right.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Well, I'm afraid I opened all the wounds here, but I could not be anything more than honest with myself.
So in this more like a psychoanalysis.
No, no,
I feel like that's.
those who live in Greece and face the system are very painfully aware of the reality you described, very eloquently. The question is, we have to get out of it. Greece went through,
You have to get out of the situation, not of Greece.
no, out of the situation. We have to get out of the storm, and how we do that? The best resource we have is the young people. And if we give them inspiration and hope and direction and help them get out of the mentality, the great mentality, then this is the only thing left to us.
Well, let me tell you,
We cannot change the political system, we cannot change the government, we cannot provide sensible advice to them. So it has to be for both.
let me be
The
blunt
question
with
is individual or
Vasily.
group. You mentioned it in your
Vasily, I'm a good friend of yours for many years, and Vasily has spent much more time in the community between Boston and University of Pittsburgh Medical School versus here. But let's not bring the young people as the other mechanical guy, right? No, a guy, I don't know, like let's get the times, the rotten architect. We should bring all the young people in to save us. And I was almost ready to, although I'm not the type to write responses, that you idiots, you are expecting another mechanical guy, right? It's the young people. You know, we all have to grab it and solve it together. And if anybody says, you know, let's the young people, let's the foreigners, let's this solve it, it's not going to happen.
How do you define young?
Yeah, well, yeah, I call myself young. My son is
You can be much
42.
younger than a 40-year-old person.
So it's an issue. If I were younger, and if I had energy, which I hope I had, right, I would start an NGO. An NGO to start teaching the small communities how to change this locality, how to change, bringing community. We're gonna, you know, set examples of this city is taking over its own mission and it's solving the problems by itself. Grassroots. And from the bottom up, because everybody expects a solution from the top down. And unless the people at the bottom decide that they need it, they need and they want a different community, then that's the only way. Otherwise, we'll be here, whether you have young people, 5 startups, 6 bright professors who have struggled and it has to be a startup from the bottom. Few examples, and then the other people, the people in life say, oh, in Kalamata they did this and this. Maybe we should do the same thing. And that will catch hopefully wildflower and then a wildfire, and then it will just, otherwise it's not.
When I said young people, I can say to replace the older generation.
Keep in mind my anathema of the mechanical God. Every time we're trying to find a solution, said you ought to think, is that our new mechanical God who's going to solve everything? Think of that, please. Because everybody says, oh, this way. We're going to bring all the professors from abroad to solve the problem.
No, they're not.
Sorry.
Thank you very much.
We'll continue with Dr. Fokion Golfopoulos from William E. Lerner Professor in Engineering, Department of Aerospace and Mechanical Engineering, University of Southern California. We'll talk about energy from renewable resources.
They have it. there you
Norm, Professor Jacobi mentioned my visit to Saloniki as part of the evaluation committee. We had the gentleman accompany us all the time until we went to the airport, and there were security people. It was pretty sad, actually. So my talk is not very different. The previous talk has close to my heart regarding this issue, but I'll be a little bit technical, not very much, because I understand the audience is diverse here. I'll talk about energy from renewable sources. And again, I'll give you an overview of what it is. You may disagree with what I'm saying, but I don't believe that agreeing and disagreeing here is fair, because we don't understand this stuff very well. In any case, to introduce myself, my journey, I was born in Lamia, central Greece, it's over here. And this is an Essek castle. My home was the first one below the castle, so I had the luxury to live in a nice area of Again, I moved to Athens 1970. 1981, I graduated from National University of Athens, who was in Exarchia at the time. So, as a young boy, 75, I found myself a year after the dictatorship fell, and all these changes in Greece, living in Exarchia, amongst that. I was coming from a conservative family. I was supposed to graduate in 1980, but some gentleman in my department decided to close the school for 7 months, so I had to delay until 81. Subsequently, I served the Greek Navy that we before hair in 83. And then I came to the States right after that, and I started my master's in a small school in California. My brother was there at the time, so I was a stepping stone for me. Subsequently, I moved on to UC Davis, where I started my doctoral degree. It's a beautiful campus in Northern California. And in 1988, we moved to Princeton. My advisor moved there, so I had the luxury to also be benefited by Princeton. I graduated in 1990. Subsequently, I was fortunate enough to get a job in the University of Southern California. This is also a football field. You know, the USC is very well known for the, among other things, for the football team. It's a beautiful campus also in downtown LA, and for a period I was also a visiting professor at Caltech, which is not very far from USC. Just want to make here a parenthesis. In the year 2000, I was elected professor at the National Technical University of Athens. In the year 2000 was the time that many colleagues of mine were considering that you may did. The good news for me was when I was elected, I decided not to go right away, but wait that I could do 9 months absence, legal absence, going back and forth. Somehow, something was telling me not to do it, and finally I resigned from the position, and I don't regret it, because for me it would be very difficult now, based on my own character. I'm not a business, I'm not somebody who can do business, right? I'm a scientist, so I couldn't be able to live there right now, based on what I hear from my friends and what I see. In any case, let's now talk a little bit about energy. As I was telling one of our colleagues earlier, when you deal with energy, it depends how you look at this. If you, like health, for example, you want to look in a global sense or a more microscopic sense, whatever. I was telling somebody earlier that at the end of the day, when you deal with energy, which, by the way, it's a major market. I just found this on the web. It's soft material, it's not scientific material. By the way, I was told some time ago that it's a few $1 trillion business. I found this one. I don't know how reliable it is. It appears to be about $6 trillion business. And today's civilization is based on the fact that we have electricity. If you turn off the lights, we're done. Back to the caves, right? So it's very central to the civilization, as we know, and it appears to be a big market, right? And it is. I cannot imagine any other market that can reach that level of expenditures, right? It's enormous. Let me give you now some interesting data here. The world needs about 15 terawatts. It's a unit that describes how much energy we need to run the world. It's about 15 units, whatever those means, the world. Wind, if you estimates of the wind energy, is about 25 times what we need to run the world. Solar is 6,000 times. We have 6,000 times what we need to run the world. And here's the paradox, not for me, for the general public. We use fossil fuels 85% a day to produce the energy we need. And according to the Energy Information Agency of the Department of Energy of the US, by the year before it is 85%, maybe down to 79%. But if you take under consideration that energy demand will be raised, I forgot, 60% or so, I did the math. In 2040, we'll be releasing 40% more carbon compared to what we do today. So that's a paradox. It's the paradox. Yes, for many people, not for myself, there is a law in physics that tells you that the cheaper way and the most compact way to produce energy, and that's what the world needs, is by degrading energy. That means nuclear to thermal or chemical to thermal. Chemical to thermal means using fossil fuels. And that's an unfortunate fact, and we have to live with this for a while. Again, these are from the web. You see the demand of energy is really going up. Of course, the carbon issue, you'll see that, and the temperature, we know. A few days ago, CNN, we got this one. There was 2 articles the same day. One, the 2 degrees of separation, meaning we release so much carbon, what's going to happen to Earth? The climate could change. I'm sure you know that. There's some interesting labs of warm water on the West Coast and Alaska and in California right now. We're suffering from droughts. So this, you cannot ignore those things, right? I mean, of course, sometimes it becomes political. People say if you're a Republican, don't believe that. If you're a Democrat, you believe in that. I don't care about those things. All I care about is evidence, right? The brief history of carbon emissions. So here's the industrial revolution, right? All of a sudden, auto and diesel developed those engines as we know them today. They developed them around there 1860 to 1900, and those engines, and then after this engine developed, look what happened to the carbon, right? And of course, our civilization changed enormously after that, right? We went to the moon because of those, not exactly the internal combustion engine, but the knowledge we got from those things. Took us to the moon in 1969. Exactly 7 years later, in one day, we went to Mars. So unprecedented things happened to the humanity. We can blame the combustion engine for many things. I'm the first one to tell you this one. At the same time, we have to realize that we can, our lives have changed a lot because of that. So there is no free lunch somehow. Then if you consider what happens with emissions, there are 2 types of carbon emissions, right? If we concentrate only on carbon that affects the global climate, you have the emissions because of human activities and then emissions of carbon because of the Earth, natural. So the natural sources of carbon is approximately 25 to 30 times more than the anthropogenic ones. However, the anthropogenic carbon emissions, what they do is they perturb the equilibrium of carbon dioxide on the environment, on the atmosphere, and that really affects our temperature by 1 degree or 2 degrees or whatever it is, which is a big number. And there's Murphy's law, the carbon dioxide has the ability to do that. That's unfortunate that carbon dioxide comes out from our cars or factories, but also has the ability to trap the heat, and that's again an issue, the major issue. Now, the anthropogenic CO2 emissions come basically from fossil fuels and cement industry, about 90%. And then where does it go? 50%, 26% they say goes to the trees. I don't know, I'm not doing this work, so I just take this information from the web. 24, but anyway, 50% goes to the atmosphere, right? So whatever we produce here from our activities, 50% goes to the atmosphere, and that's where the problem is. Renewable energy sources, there's a lot of discussion about this recently. These are resources that are self-regenerating in nature. Sunlight, wind, biomass, waves, tides, geothermal. I mean, these are, maybe you can suggest a few more, but these are the basic ones. We call them, if you can use energy coming from these sources, we call it clean or green energy. And if you deal with them only, then we don't produce any gases that will go to the atmosphere like carbon dioxide and affect the climate. Also, there are terms like sustainable energy, that means that you sustain it, so you don't need to use non-renewable sources like oil, etc. Again, those terms are being around recently and they become more and more popular. In terms of popularity, after 2004, we start seeing the oil going up. Before the 2004, not too much activities in this area, but since then, there's a lot of interest because of climate damage, increasing oil prices. My feeling is, if I understand well the world at my age, that money drives a lot of things. But anyway, maybe this one, the main one. And at the time, people were thinking that maybe we don't have too much oil, etc., too much gas. But now, again, we see that fracking, etc., we like it or not, lots of hydrocarbons that come out. And maybe there are lots of hydrocarbons we don't know about. And then governments and all over the world start paying too much attention to that. And they encourage, entrepreneurs to do investments in this area. This is all fine. We know that you don't, even in the university nowadays, if you want try to hire faculty, the university president or the dean will tell you, I want somebody who has solar energy or wind energy. I want to look good. And the provost told me, my university told me on time that typically people who sit on those chairs, you're a dean for 5 years, you want to have something under your belt. So you say, I will serve for 5-7 years as dean, and then look, I'm pushing for solar energy, it's good for the earth, right? And then you forget what happens if this person you hire will stick around and the solar goes nowhere, and it may not go nowhere, and then you're stuck with this person, right? So there are many political decisions in the universities. So my personal, because maybe I don't believe I'm conservative, maybe I'm conservative here. I see a lot, especially in universities, that bothers me, and of course the politicians, the first one to do this, is they follow fashionable trends and fields. And I see university presidents all saying the same thing. We all want to do nanotechnology. We want to do biotechnology. I don't hear anything different because Stanford did it, MIT did it, we do it also, right? This is something that concerns me too, right? Why shouldn't we do it, right? Are we solving the right problem? This is the bigger. Anyway, that's what I'm saying here. So they all go one way, and they forget what is the big monster here. And let me go back. What is the big monster here that will go nowhere for a long time is this. This will go nowhere for, at least that's what the government says, okay? So this is the real problem to solve, and these are very important topics to address, especially universities, but being mindful, not at the expense of urgent needs we have to save the earth. And the earth will not be saved based on the numbers I will show you in the short term. In the long term, that's a different story. And we should look at it. Solar energy, again, I don't want to bore you too much. It's the photovoltaics and solar thermal. There are ways to harness it. Photovoltaics, especially in Greece, right? In Greece right now, we're talking about Greece. Most farmers, they want, instead of farming their land, to use photovoltaics, right? That's a disaster. Anyways, the sun goes into the solar cells, produces electricity, etc. I'm sure you're aware of that. And then there are the PV modules, PV arrays. They're all based on silicon. Do we have enough silicon for this? I don't know. And then there's other technologies. If you go to Nevada, you see a lot of them. They concentrate the solar thermal energy in one point, and they create heat. And then this heat, depending on the temperature of those panels, can heat up the water, or sometimes they can run a little power plant to produce electricity. This is a very nice concept. Leaders, the numbers matter here. Germany is 35 gigawatts. Anyway, I give you here, according to the data I found, Germany has somehow the highest production, 35 gigawatts. Those are the numbers that concern me. In 2005, the world production of energy from solar was 0.02%. It went up by a factor of 20, which is great, but it's still 0.5%. Okay. Noise level, in my opinion, in 2013, we have to be mindful of that. Photovoltaic array, they are never small. The concentrated solar farm was telling you, if you go to Nevada, the first time I drove there, I didn't know what it was, but then I figured it out. So there's a tower here, and all the basically mirrors concentrate energy here, etc. Look at this real estate that you need. Scalability, you have a house, you want to heat up your swimming pool, you do this, large scale, you can get the picture, right? Wind energy. Wind energy is a little better. Again, the wind, you have wind somewhere that have wind farms. And there are onshore farms that inside inland, offshore, at least 10 kilometers away from the land, and near shore within several kilometers from the coast. One problem here is the so-called capacity factor. The wind is intermittent. So sometimes you have wind, sometimes you don't have wind. And they have this capacity factor that tells you what's basically your performance compared to the, if you have continuous, if the turbine runs all the time, this is between 20 and 40%. Sometimes you have it, sometimes you don't. Leaders, China, twice the solar, right? From Germany, right? The numbers matter here, right? 100, China is leader according to what they found, and then you see the rest of the countries here, okay? So we have more contribution from wind than we have from solar. Wind turbines, that's how they look, okay? And the principle is similar to what you have to lift the aeroplane onto the wing. And look at this one. I heard, I mean, before in China, they have some offshore turbines with 100 meters diameter from here to there. Now they're going up to 150 meters diameter, 1.5 times the football field, right? Diameter, right? So, and look at the ship. These are major infrastructure. In terms of power contribution, in 2005, 0.4% of the world energy was coming from wind. Now it's 2.5%. Much better than solar, but still the numbers are quite low compared to the utilization of fossil fuels. Hydropower, that's been very popular. You basically collect the water, the labor, whatever, and then you send it through a turbine, and it creates a so-called hydroelectricity. And of course, you need dams to do this. It's estimated 19% of all electricity of the world, just electricity, right? The energy is not only electricity, it's produced by hydropower, right? And the leaders are China again, 196, Canada. So it's quite significant compared to basically, it's about double the wind and 4 times the solar. And these are the leaders in the world in terms of hydropower. And this is the schematic of how it works. You have an intake here, you go in, you have the turbine rotates, rotates the generator, and then you send electricity to the company. These are some nice pictures. This is the Hoover Dam, the three gorges dam in China, the biggest in the world. I don't know where, this is a nice picture, just put it there. But anyway, if you go to the Hoover Dam, it's really beautiful, especially the new bridge. I don't know, sometimes they operate and you see the water flow. It's very, very nice. Now, how much of the world power we get from hydro? Well, in 2006, 2%, and now we're about 3.5%. I mean, these are not negligible numbers, but they're still not at the noise level, but they're still small. Biomass and biofuels, I have been working on this for some time. There's a misconception. First, I got very excited until somebody grounded me. I felt that with the biomass and biofuels, basically, the carbon you release comes from organisms that die, basically. So we have carbon and hydrogen in our bodies or plants. And then this carbon, I mean, through a process, you can use this biomass and produce basically biofuel. And there are certain crops you can grow, and they call them energy crops. You can produce biofuels from 2 different ways. One is from high-end crops, the other is from low-end crops. High-end crops means soybeans or corn. This is a crime. I know senators will support the corn with ethanol. That's not good, right? It's a big topic of discussion. It's not ethical. So the only way to do this right is to use energy crops, low quality plants that you don't use for food. But at the same time, those things can grow very fast, but they take up a lot of land. And the land is used for other things. These are issues. Anyway, very popular. Biodiesel is coming out through some chemical processes from this biomass, and you can run trucks, you can run, basically trucks, diesel engines. Okay? However, unfortunately, this is a complicated issue. The engines cannot use biodiesel. They need to be blended. So what we do is we take the biodiesel and we mix it with regular diesel.
Another biogas is also a gas that is produced from landfills and sewage and manure, and it contains basically methane, but it contains also a lot of contaminants, okay, and halogenated combined, and very, very, very dangerous contaminants, but we can use them. And bioalcohol, this is a big deal. Brazil runs on this one, ethanol, right? What is not ethical is when you say, I'm going to grow an island of corn and produce ethanol. So, too many issues here. It's absolutely not ethical to do it with corn. We have established that. Not in the Senate, but in the scientific field, we know that. However, people don't know something else. When you run cars on ethanol, you produce carcinogenic aldehydes. There are some emissions that are very bad for our health. Okay, but nobody talks about it, right? So they look only on the beneficial effects of carbon emissions, but the emissions is a different story. 20 times more aldehydes than a gasoline car produces. Anyway, these are details that are lost in translation. These are the leaders in biomass, of course. Okay, and this is some pictures here. Yeah, these are funny pictures, and of course the real wood and some kind of items. Geothermal energy, now we're dealing with really noise, but it comes up. I'm going to finish with this one and then some final closing comments. Basically, in some parts of the world, there is hot water under the earth, in various depths. And people are using it, as you'll see. I mean, for example, this temperature can be 10 to 16 centigrade. They say basically you can take this water and heat up homes, so you save energy there. And also, there's another technology that they use. They heat up in hot rocks below the earth, the fluid water made to create steam to run the turbine and create electricity. These are all good things. Let me see. One major, the only country that makes noise about it is Iceland because of their geology, and apparently geothermal sources account for about 90% of Iceland electricity, which is very nice, very nice. But this is very specific to Iceland, and also the geothermal heating is used for 87% of the homes in the country. And Iceland also plans to go fully fossil fuel free in the near future. That's what they say. However, it was surprised to me to find out that the greatest geothermal energy production is the US. Okay? And 750 megawatts, not even 1 gigawatt. So these are very small numbers, right? Solar was about 50 gigawatts. Wind was, for the first country, wind was about 100, and hydro was about 200, right? These are really, really small numbers. Philippines is also has significant production, and the leaders are shown here on absolute numbers. Of course, the effect of the country is different, right? Iceland is 7th, but they use it more for their own needs, right? But the contribution is more than 5%. But I'm talking about here as numbers. The biggest numbers we saw was 3.5%, and this is typical plant, etc. Pros and cons of renewable energy. 2 more slides and I'm done. Save time. We cannot run out of them. You always have wind, you always have solar. The use of, if you create your own electricity, you basically reduce the strain on the power distribution system. And it seems now that green electricity, there's a lot of incentives, becomes more and more available to us, the average consumer. In general, and that's general, and then in my closing arguments, I will make a point about this. Renewables are not hazardous for the environment. We'll come back to this in a moment. Some issues accepted by the community is we have to be careful biomass and geothermal, so we don't deplete them. Biomass, somebody told me that if you plant the entire earth with biomass and you use it for fuel, we don't need anything, right? No food. We can only cover 10% of our needs, right? So we have to be careful with those things, right? Another problem I realized in a conference in China is that from electrical engineers, I'm not an electrical engineer, is when you have this intermittent production of electricity, it's very difficult to coordinate how the transmission of electricity works
It's a major challenge for electrical engineers, and they know more about it compared to me about this. Renewable heat is still expensive, that's what they said. And very important, if you're trying to go green, then you have to use a lot of land. And this is something I've seen in Greece. The farmers in central Greece, they instead of farming the land, they go that way. Now, here's something that relates to Greece. I'm not going to talk about the social and economic problems of Greece already because you're right. Excellent talk. But certain things are implied here, right? Okay. I say, all I'm trying to say is that in those comments, all those things are nice. These are very general material you find on the web. Is this applicable to Greece? Can it be used in Greece to change the situation? If you want to have a chance with such an initiative, first of all, you have to know what you're doing, and you must have very well-defined short and long-term goals, right? Nothing can happen randomly. Participation of research institutions, universities, and other national research entities. You have to do work to result in new discoveries and optimize best practices. It's very difficult. Energy is like cancer. We don't know much. We don't know exactly what we do certain times, and the problem is at the molecular level. Okay, if we knew how to build batteries that work, batteries are not in good shape, regardless of Tesla. I had a comment about Tesla. And if we knew how to collect the sun, you cannot imagine how many people in engineering and how many Nobel Prize laureates are working on this. They don't have an answer. Nature does not want you to collect effectively solar energy. Okay, and the key is our understanding of quantum effects. Unfortunately, it's not because we are smart engineers and I go to my garage at Steve Jobs and develop a new solar panel. Those have been done, period, right? You cannot solve the problem of cancer, you're just a smart physician. You don't solve the cancer problem just because you're a good doctor and you can cure people. No. You need good science, excellent science, and this is a very, very difficult topic. That's the worry. In Greece, one time I was invited by somebody to talk to me. It was the secretary of Ministry of Development, whatever. He asked me what's my opinion about Greece research, etc. It was in the year 2000. I said, well, research is needed. Don't worry about that. We're going to go and buy everything from the Europeans, the Americans. We don't need to worry about those things, right? My opinion is that you cannot depend on off-shelf imported technologies. To me, as far as developing, improving the economy in Greece, if we have a chance, this cannot be, we cannot do this. In my opinion. Well, the problem is that one time I was appointed in a committee for energy, and a professor from social science came, and I was young, I didn't know, and I was very interested. Why this? Huh? No, in California. Why is a professor from social sciences there? I mean, I'm an engineer. I know energy. What do they know? But I was educated, right? We was learned, right? It's extremely important. Extremely important. You cannot ignore the social effects, right? For example, tell the people not to drive their cars and bike every day. Can you do this? No. You can do this. I mean, simple things and more complicated things. Economic, environmental, life cycle. See, if you dare to produce ethanol from corn, then you have to go back and say, okay, I'm producing corn and my CO2 will be improving, etc. Go back and see what it would take to farm the corn, right? Account for, and there are some people, I don't do this, but some people maybe you must be aware of that, do the life cycle analysis, right? And at the end of the day, that's what matters, right? If you produce more carbon compared to a gasoline engine, this is a no-winning proposition. There are serious issues, and economic is a big one. There are all kinds of ideas, just to give you a flavor, how to build a perfect car. Sure, if we can build an engine out of gold, or we can use a lot of gold and platinum in our car, we can do much better. There are lots of technologies. But is this a winning proposition? The answer is no. Who's going to buy it, right? Can do it. Serious issues. Do we want to eat? We want to feed our children, or we want to have fuel, right? If you say, I'm going to use corn, etc., use all the farmland to produce biofuels, for example. Or use all the farmland to basically plant solar. Solar will take a lot of space, okay? We have to realize that the fossil fuels will not go anywhere anytime soon. As I saw you from the Department of Energy, they will stick around for a while in the carbon emissions. We don't understand the science very well, and our current technologies is not as cool as they look on the web, right? We don't understand a lot of things. And so the only way to beat the fossil fuels is through innovation. And again, this innovation will come with long-term investment, going back to your points and Professor Hope's point, in higher education and research. This will not be done in our garage, period. The garage days are over. This will be a product of long-term investments in research, and those things cannot be achieved overnight. You don't wake up one day and say, oh, I'm going to do solar in Greece or wind in Greece, and we go to the mechanical engineering in Saloniki, and smart people, they are very smart people indeed, excellent people, and will do it. It takes a long time, a very long time, okay? And finally, I added this closing, this argument here. Is Tesla a success story? I don't want to quiz you on this. Could or should we all drive one? Yeah. Okay. According to the Department of Energy, if we all drive Tesla, that's not the point I want to make. We basically burn coal to run Tesla. The coal is the worst fuel you can burn, right? It's just absolutely disaster for the earth. Worse is that Tesla, the success they have, first of all, unless you're Elon Musk or you don't know Musk, you cannot call it a success story. He's not making money. He's packing a lot of batteries. 600 to 700 kilograms of each car is a battery, Tesla S. So you're driving the battery. And we don't know in the scientific and technological field, some people may say that maybe the batteries will become smaller, but personally I don't see how. There are no breakthroughs in batteries. They managed to package it better, that's all. I give them that. But you drive a Tesla, you drive the battery. Okay, that's the problem. Okay, just look at the numbers. So I'm not sure if this is the way to go, and of course, can the general public afford it? That's a different story. But keep in mind, every time you push the gas pedal, the acceleration pedal, then somebody burns coal in Virginia or Nevada, so for you to drive the Tesla, right? Basically, we'll be driven by coal, unless we discover fusion and other things. I don't believe solar will be able to supply so much electricity to save the problem. So anyway, the problem is still there. And thank you for your attention. Here I have some just to give you an idea of the 747 and a wind turbine, right? The size, land, fuel versus food, right? And fuel. Anyway, these are some fun pictures. Thank you so much.
Any questions? Yeah. Has anybody sat down to write a global model for energy, maybe in the life cycle framework, so that when somebody comes to solar, how much energy is needed in order to produce the solar cells to some extent, right? Because solar is abundant, it's plentiful, but it is diffuse, right? The closer you go to the sun, the more concentrated it is. And that, of course, brings me, the other question is, we forgot about nuclear. Nuclear is the freest of all energies, right? It's the most condensed.
Right.
We don't know how to deal with the waste. But carbon is a waste as well, and we don't know how to deal with it either.
Right. In terms of life cycle, there are lots of studies out there. Again, I know people who do this. I'm not very much into that, but there are lots of studies. Now, my concern is that whatever I show you here, I show you numbers, right? What is the uncertainty of those numbers, right?
No,
it's impossible, even for the Department of Energy, to be so accurate, right? So I'm not sure, but people have done people do this for a living, actually. In many universities, they do life cycle analysis. And, I'm pretty sure this is being published somewhere, but I cannot point you to this publication. Nuclear, again, fusion, we're using water to produce electricity, to produce nuclear energy. We're always 25 years from break even. When I was a student, it was 25 years now. Then Lawrence National, the ignition facility we have, still 25 years away from success. I don't know. The current Fukushima didn't help. The Germans shut it down. The 24 plants were building in China. They stopped them. I don't know what the latest with China. Fukushima didn't help at all. And this is the political part. So there are issues there.
The French are continuing though.
The French are very successful. Correct.
The French have
Yes.
produced 80%
Yes.
of their electricity from
Yes,
nuclear
absolutely.
power.
Absolutely. Yes.
I just want to continue on that. All of these debates have this much science in them, and they have this much. I'll call it religion. There's no actual God, but to all intents and
Yes.
purposes, it's a
I agree with you, 100%.
religious debate. And nuclear is even more of a religious debate. Everyone's talking about Fukushima, a disaster where placing a town by the sea killed 20,000 people. Total number of deaths at Fukushima from nuclear radiation, 0.
Yeah.
Nobody at Fukushima has died because of the nuclear power plant. In fact, they're talking about reopening it. It was badly maintained, badly built. It got hit by a tsunami, and it still didn't manage to kill anyone. So, my question is what can we do to get the religion out of the debate and actually have the scientific debate?
The public perception, earlier we were talking about social issues in Greece. This is a social problem. Even university presidents will have a hard time hiring people in nuclear or fossil fuel area, but they will hire somebody to do geothermal, right? Because it looks good, right? I might sound too, I'm not that conservative, but here I'm conservative in that because I'm looking at I totally agree with you. I have no idea how to change the public perception. No idea. In California, you cannot build anything anymore, right? In California. Fair enough, but we do, right? You cannot solve the problem of the world for the next 20, 30 years by solar or wind. These are important numbers, but they're small. That's my problem, right? And I'm not a spokesman for I work on fossil fuel, but I'm an oncologist. You cannot blame the oncologist for the cigarette smoking, right? The oncologist is there with people who smoke. So the oncologist is not a representative, that's a spokesman for Philip Morris, right? By no means. We need oncologists. And unfortunately, we killed the oncology department here. I agree with you. I don't know what to tell you about this. This is very serious. Yes.
I'm wondering, does Greece have any incentives to motivate utilization of these natural resources so we can get optimum results and benefits from it? Are there currently any incentives to push us towards this direction? Because we have the wind, we have the sun, we need to utilize it.
Well, I say here, careful to strategic planning as well. I mean, just the first comment. In fact, you hear from people who were in the front lines. Professor Jacobu is in the front lines there. I mean, he's fighting every day. I mean, this is too high. I mean, this is too cute for Greece, I guess. Who's going to plan those things, right? There, it's everything. I don't know. Lieutenant, you may want to say something. Is it possible something like that to be organized in Greece to have a meaningful result?
Here knows the situation, right? We've been blasted by the Germans, for example, how can we not use the solar power? So there are incentives, but incentives change so fast that serious entrepreneurs, they're going to make decisions based on predictability, cannot plan. So you're going to hear incentives, for example, that you produce solar, produce energy that you're going to sell to the E, then the money you're going to buy out is not guaranteed for years. It will change overnight.
That's right.
So that unpredictability undermines everything.
Yes.
But I think what Professor Gofoko was talking about even stronger so is understand the global market, understand the global trends, where you're going to find most of the Greek politicians blasting you whenever you present them. They're going to tell you again and again, and during my speech, and I'm going to talk a little bit about it, that Greece is a special case. I'm really peeved of hearing that phrase. They do not want to hear about global trends. You try to explain to them, I need to understand what's happening globally to customize the situation for the country. And strategy-wise, it's clear the case that there's no strategy. They don't yet know how to develop strategy. So everything is short-term, and I'm responding to panicking crisis. And the new minister of the environment only yesterday said something to the fact that throughout Europe, diesel operating cars really are a burden to the environment. So now everybody's freaking out that they're going to give another tax on diesel running vehicles, even though they gave incentive actually for people to purchase these vehicles. So there's no rationale, there's no organizational memory of how we move forward with these new institutions. And any new minister that comes with what you knows very well, with these powerful young boys or girls, which he or she calls counselors, that have no background whatsoever in business, they're going to go to shots.
Yes.
My question is this: how do we dismantle or overcome the oxymoron scheme of having an institution like Harvard, for instance, that has a big campaign on divestment from fossil fuels? And even though we have the research to indicate that we definitely need to have that happen, President Faust is almost adamant about not moving that direction. So if we cannot make it happen here, and maybe why do you think that we cannot make it happen?
It's a bigger problem. I totally agree.
And how do we overcome?
I have no idea. We have hard time with the university presidents because it starts from there, and the deans listen to the president would say, I want to see solar, I want to see nano, bio, wind, whatever. Don't give me fossil fuels.
Yeah, they want the same.
Okay, I don't know. This is a bigger problem. I agree with you. This is not something that pleases me, but that's where we are, unfortunately.
And two comments. I believe, maybe I'm a romantic, but I believe we can actually get most people to ride their bikes or walk to work and not drive cars if we really try. And I do drive an electric car. So
Yes.
I think that I made a good choice, and I worry a little bit about
Who powers your car?
Harvard.
No,
So I charge
who
it.
powers your car? Not what fuel powers your car.
Okay.
You need fuel, right? Coal.
What do you mean by that? For the battery itself?
No,
The
the electricity you get didn't grow on the trees, right? So some power plant burns coal, which is the worst fuel you can burn in terms of carbon emissions. And by the way, we have so much coal in this world, we're gonna burn it. The Chinese in Mongolia, they have absolutely incredible amount of coal, and they will burn it. So given that, what we do, getting back to the argument, but your car runs on coal.
I agree, but otherwise this electricity would have been wasted. Somebody else would be using it to leave the lights on, for instance. They would put less coal in the planet. Hold on.
Yes.
That's a fallacious argument. You can't claim that like all electric cars
No,
are now running on
exactly.
coal, because when you have, if everybody was driving
Right.
electric cars, you said if everybody drove Tesla, we would just be burning more coal, which is the worst.
Yes.
But that's not really true, because if there was more demand for that kind of electricity, then the demand would be there for cleaner electricity. There would be an overhang, because electric cars can run on both solar energy, wind energy, literally anything.
Yes.
Whereas a traditional car can only run on oil,
Right.
which we have a limited amount.
But if you all drive Tesla, I'm going to that limit, and I mean, we have a lot of cars, right? Then there is no way that, according to the numbers I show you, that's not my numbers, this is Department of Energy numbers. Those numbers are not sufficient for all of us here to run Teslas. Maybe two of us can run it. I agree with you, right? Absolutely. I can put solar panel in my California home and drive my Tesla from there. So I'm a good citizen, but I'm one person, right? But my neighborhood drives gasoline cars, right?
The more demand we create.
Absolutely. That's what the Department of Energy says. Then we're going to be burning coal.
This is like organic food. We can all, a few of us can do it.
Right.
But we can't all do it.
No.
Your neighbor can't plug in his car and his solar panels because he lives in an apartment. The sun is only providing 140 watts per square meter, and it doesn't shine every day. You get home, so the numbers simply don't add up. They add up for people like us with middle class income, but they don't add up for the planet.
All those things we're talking to, it's exactly that point. We talk to people who make money. The poverty level on this earth is quite high, even in the United States right now. Are you telling me that the person who comes, the housekeeper who comes to our home, would be able to drive anything like that? I don't see that. I don't see that. Even Tesla, I take Tesla as an example, right? Goes down in price. They will never, these people will be driving. So these are the social issues and economic issues. We have to be mindful. Yes, the elite in this country, we all can ride Tesla, right? Most of this room maybe can afford the Tesla, right? But again, this is a bigger thing. And if Chinese start running electric cars, then they will burn everything. Just Google it to see what they have at the border with Mongolia. Infinite number of coal. There will infinite amounts of coal. They will burn it. So it's a global thing, right? So we have to be very careful. So there is no, it's not a winner to run electric cars. There are better solutions, but again, this gets too technical. Unfortunately, we have a problem. Nobody has the answer. There's no silver bullet. And if only one person, talk to anybody who won the Nobel Prize about those things. They tell you, we don't know. It's really, really hard problem. Yes. I'm monopolizing the discussion already.
You mentioned,
Sorry.
you mentioned that probably it will take 25 or 30 years to have the solar energy available.
Not what the Department of
Fusion energy.
Fusion energy. The Department of Energy doesn't give too much. The contribution of solar is not going to be significant. Wind, yes, wind will go up. Solar, the projections are, unless we have a revolution, and the revolution would come from understanding of quantum effects at the electronic level of the atoms. That's where it is. It sounds a little bit exotic, but it's not.
Whatever the area is, will take substantial research to
Yes.
to increase the understanding. If the investment or research on energy was increased, would it be accelerated?
No, there's a lot of money right now in batteries. There's a lot of money in batteries, but I don't know, according to scientists who are better than me in understanding the technology, it's not too promising.
In the south of France right now, they are building a fusion, next big worldwide fusion energy laboratory. It's taking them 15 years just to build the site. That's before any scientists move in. So the time scale for this, we're not going to develop fusion energy in someone's garage.
No, I understand.
The best scientists in the universe are working on this. The best physicists, they cannot control the plasma before.
So it will take, I think it will be before the end, I would say to the end of the century. We work on that basis. We won't have anything before the end of this century.
The problem is Congress. You cannot tell that to Congress. Congress doesn't
No,
understand this.
they
They say they wave their hands. Most of them are in either they're not scientists, right? They're mostly, kind of lawyers, whatever, and they don't understand the stuff. And that's the problem. But the Congress decides that's what it is, and the public perception. And this one, I have no idea how to change. This one is beyond. I don't know. So.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lopopoulos. We'll continue with Dr. Nikos Vassas, from Professor of Criminology and Criminal Justice, Co-Director, Institute for Security and Public Policy of Northeastern University. He will talk us about necessary steps towards enhanced integrity and accountability in government and business.
I'm just finding the connection here. I need an adapter. Hi, everybody. A couple of
There is an
people
adapter
see
there.
us-
Nico, there is an adapter there.
There is?
Yeah.
There is an adapter for the Mac?
Yes.
Okay. So a couple of themes to connect with the previous two talks. The first one is that we cannot make off-the-shelf solutions, and we need to develop something that is homegrown, home appreciated, and with a local buy-in. The second common theme is that you have to require, it takes a multi-stakeholder approach to fix governance and anti-corruption in Greece, and that includes civil society, the private sector, opposition or political parties, and everyone who matters, including educational institutions. The third one, and most important, is that we need a strategic approach. And it takes a while.
So start your presentation. You have two screens now in your mind. Start your
I
presentation.
have a black screen for myself. You can see it.
Well, then you have to go to settings and display.
reflecting back.
The first point to make, in fact, good morning, everybody, I apologize for the delay in starting the presentation, is that no matter what public policy issue you want to address, environment, energy, education, security, finance, the economy, and so on, will not happen without integrity, without accountability. And that is not a problem only in Greece, it's a problem everywhere. But fighting for a better governance, fighting for integrity in public and private spheres, is not simply a matter for social scientists, it's not a matter for lawyers, it's a matter for every single one of us, because every single, whatever we do in our professions, in our family lives, in our holidays, depends, the quality of life depends on that. And corruption is a problem in Greece, as in many other places, as you will see in a few minutes. And Greece has, however, some specificity. This is why we cannot take off the shelf answers and solutions, especially in relation to outside factors. Okay? You were talking about importing solutions and technologies. Well, you cannot import laws, you cannot import policy, you cannot import attitudes without understanding the local context. And when you look historically, when you look at the background of Greece, we do have a rather long history of foreign interventions. We had 4 centuries of the Ottoman occupation, right? We had the German law imported right after the independence. Then we had all kinds of problems with during the war, and we had a divided society after the war. Eventually, we're going to get the PowerPoint up and running as well. And then what we had, and the Siemens problems, which actually epitomize and illustrate very well some of the governance problems we have in Greece, go back to the 1920s. Okay? That is when the Greek engineer got married to the founder of Siemens, and was at the same time the man who was getting all kinds of contracts for the company in Greece. Siemens activities continued during the German occupation of Greece in the 1940s, and I'll just I wanted to give you a definition so we understand what we're talking about. It is not entirely legal. I am a lawyer, but we have to go beyond the law for this. The misuse of public and or private power, office, and authority for private gain. And the reason I'm using this definition is because then you can have private function. There is this week an example from Britain that shows us how you can have corruption without the involvement of public officials. You sell secrets to a competing company, for example, for an undue advantage. So we need to take care of both of these. And I will give you some background also on what I call lawful and unlawful practice, things that the law allows government subsidize. You look at their effects, they're worse than organized crime. So we need to take care of these things because they do affect the quality of our life and those of our children. So going back to the background in our relations with foreigners and foreign forces, we have the development of clientelism. It's a long tradition, but things got worse when we had a divided society after the Civil War, where a group, classes of people were excluded from well-paying bank jobs, government positions, and so on. And then in the early 1980s, we have a socialist government coming in. It was their turn to eat. So then they continued the long tradition, perhaps not as sophisticated as before, not as measured as before, not as predictable as before. But then the problem became bipartisan, and it got normalized. So clientelism became part of the culture across the board, right? So that is the problem. Not only in Greece, however, and let me show you, despite extraordinary resources, like for 15 years now, the international community has been throwing into governance, development, and anti-corruption. Here is a number of governance indicators of the World Bank is collecting. These are all countries, all United Nations member states. And you can see from 1996 to 2003 what the trend is with those. And control of corruption is one of them, right? So we're not doing well. And we is collective. It is not just Greece. But Greece can learn one or two things from those kinds of signs of stagnation or failure to deal with problems that matter. You were talking about how we get politics or religion out of science. Well, you need scientific integrity as well. There are problems in that area too. Looking at the kinds of corruption that we have in Greece. Bribery is the one that everyone is talking about. You can go to the press, you can find articles. Sometimes they cover it well, sometimes just bits and pieces. Banks and the media, another big scandal that involved a former prime minister, and it had to do also with political party finance, a problem that continues to be an issue to this day. Then you have, in fact, lack of integrity inside the parliament. It would be interesting to have a case study, and in fact, in this room, we have the two extreme backbenches, the students, one from Tufts, one from Northeastern. We're doing, in fact, this summer a project on corruption and anti-corruption in Greece. One of the things that we could consider, in fact, I didn't think about it before, is to take a look at the Greek bills, things that are submitted to Parliament to become laws, and see what is the issue that has been provided for, and what kind of other issues are tagged on that have absolutely nothing to do with the main topic, but because somebody has a favor to repay or a political issue, goal to achieve, and it gets smuggled in. So we're smuggling in issues to unrelated bills, right? And this needs to be well documented, illustrated, and fixed. So you have, in fact, laws sometimes that get passed so that very specifically give amnesty, immunity, impunity to very concrete people who happen to be friends of theirs, funders of theirs, financiers of theirs, or ideologically aligned. But the bills are introduced specifically in order to make sure that people get away scot-free for bad things they have done in the past. And that is a malpractice at the lawmaking level. Then what you have is the whole justice system that is malfunctioning, where you have extraordinary delays. And if you have a smart lawyer, they're going to delay, they're going to file motion after motion, and then you're going to have the statutory limitations expired, and you can't do anything illegal, right? Again, that's not typically a Greek problem. You have that same in Brazil, you have it in India, you have it in many other countries, right? Non-collection of taxes, customs duties, and so on. Different level of players, different class of players, different levels of payments and misconduct. Then we had Siemens. Okay, we had a scandal. The Americans went after them and found out that Siemens was actually systematically, as a market policy, going after every single country and competitor through bribes. It was systematic, it was well known, it was coming from the top. It was going on in Greece as well, right? So there was a settlement. There was a bi-parliamentary, a multi-party parliamentary committee that found that about 2 billion euro was the cost to the Greek treasury of the Siemens misconduct. But the settlement was for something like 270 plus 6 perhaps million euro. So the settlement itself has been, the opposition at the time alleged that, it is a settlement. If it costs 2 billion euro and you're settling for a fraction of that, you're giving the place away. Privatizations, a whole host of questions there, and very few case studies to understand what actually happened there. But we do have very good examples from privatization in Eastern European countries after the fall of communism, where all kinds of disasters took place, including, in fact, another traditional democracy in the UK. We did have privatization of state property with all kinds of problems as well. We did have our share of things. One of my favorite ones is a typical way of fooling the public that we're doing something about corruption when we're actually undermining it. And that is when we create new laws, a new institution, and say, look at this, we have a new prosecutor who is specializing on anti-corruption. That must be a good thing, right? Because what happened, if you remember the list Lagarde, the people who had fat accounts in Switzerland and weren't paying taxes, at least most of them, was being investigated by specialized economic prosecutors who were doing their job of making inroads. So the new special anti-corruption prosecutor now takes over and nothing happens. So it actually took powers from those who were doing their job. These people stepped down, didn't want to even talk about this anymore. And while Transparency International perceptions went up and were doing well, we actually torpedoed the good work that some people were actually doing. So this is another kind of thing. Fixing the results of soccer, football games, right? The Fagelika. You gotta pay in order to get medical attention in some places. When you have a national health care system, it shouldn't happen, but it does. And this is the kind of quiet corruption, as they call it in Africa, where you have that, and that is the type of corruption that affects everyday routine activities. Your parking, your taxes, going through borders, getting a license. Those are the kinds of things that are low-level corruption, but affect perceptions, affect your understanding of what this is all about. And as you can see, there's a whole range of things from top to bottom. All right? It is a problem situation. It is not that you have a kleptocrat at the top. It is not that you have one party that's on the take. You got all of them, right? So we do have a systemic problem to deal with, and that is how we're going back to the question of strategy. If you want to do something, yes, you can create some island of integrity here or there, but it's a tsunami coming after you, and that island of integrity is going to be washed away unless you have a strategy and unless you have a multi-stakeholder approach to keep you going. So some illustrations, I will go very quickly. Some examples of how obvious corruption and malpractice is. When you have, for example, dead people that are over 100 years old, if they had survived the crisis and everything, they're still receiving, pension. Or you have 324 people formally on paper having a swimming pool, and all you do is Google map the place, and you find that there are 16,974 swimming pools, and no one's paying taxes for those, right? So you can do that online in an afternoon. You don't need to have any sophisticated government structure, right? It's just not doing the job. Or in Copa Isle, all right? Decades ago, it was trained, and they still have a department with 30 full-time civil servants working on it, right? So these are the kind of examples that that you can find multiple. All right. So, over regulation, inefficient government, clientelism and rent-seeking. Then you have the oligarchs, handful of families, long traditions of running the show from top to bottom, and that continues. I mean, you can see that the same families are controlling the banking, the sports, the media, political finance, the works. And that is what is affecting attitude. That is what is affecting optimism or pessimism, and willingness to participate in something that might work in the future. Right? It isn't a matter of only the young people; it's a matter of all people. Right? So you have injustice as a result, revenue shortfalls, and a trust deficit. These are big ticket items that we need to take care of, and that, to add to that equation, you have the corruption from outside that actually made things even worse for Greece, and that is related to the creation of the debt. We're talking about, Greece is bankrupt and all the rest of it. We know it, and the economist, left or right wing, will tell you that. But where there has been relative silence, how did that debt get created? There was some discussion about how did Greece get into the euro in the first place. And everybody knew that they made up. I mean, it was fake accounting, all right? They cooked the books in order to do that, but they didn't do it on their own. I mean, these were young members of the European Union. They were taken by the hand and shown how to do it. There was knowledge and participation in this political project. It wasn't an economic one to bring member states and bring the Greeks in, just in case the Russians would come in, and that's enough, right? So how did the debt get created? And Goldman Sachs and other financial institutions had a major role to play there. Because Goldman Sachs made hundreds of millions of dollars creating that debt and creating the impression, advising the government on how to deceive the public and other policymakers to hide the ill health, financial ill health that was in place. So they created that debt. They made hundreds of millions of dollars for this misrepresentation, for this accounting fraud, not in legal terms. You can see where I actually go a little beyond the law, but it is misrepresentation. And then immediately, another branch of Goldman Sachs goes and sells short the same debt that they created for Greece. They knew that it was going to go bad. They knew it was trash. How can you create something, make money, and then make money again by selling it short? And not be held accountable for it, and not have a debate about it. Right? So, financial institutions, lenders, and policymakers in the Troika and beyond are fully aware of what is going on, and that can be documented, and that is part of what we're trying to do this summer. Another myth is that the bailout was of Greece or Greece. Nothing further from the truth. It's just exactly like the bailout during the Clinton administration of Mexico, when these are bailouts of the banks. It was Wall Street that was bailed out in the Mexico case, and it was French and German banks that were bailed out in the instance of Greek debt. If Greece had declared bankruptcy at that time, that would have been a systemic event. That would have been a black swan. That would have brought down the Eurozone. That was an ace to be played by that government if they had any guts to say, we have something to talk about here, and give us a set of policies that actually include some economic growth in there, so there can be meaningful reform, because reform is necessary too. But what we had was buying the privately held debt and shifting it to the public sector. And of course, Greece could not hold that. Right? So the Greek and German banks were bailed out. They got 100 cents to the euro that they had lent to Greece at relatively high interest rates, so they make money already before. And that debt was actually reinsured by American institutions, and this is why the Obama administration did care about that too. They did not want a default of Greece at that time. Now, to be honest, nobody cares because a lot of them take care of. Right? But the bailout, the money that was paid was to service those debts. It was not to help the Greeks or the Greek economy or the Greek government for that matter. So let's call things, the fix, as we say, and Siemens story, but it is important to note that an audit report from the KPMG has remained secret, and the names there of 20 leading Greek politicians for 100 million rights figure in that report. This is still not being resolved, and the money that was part of the settlement in 2011 was actually never spent. I mean, speaking of a government that doesn't do its job, it was meant to actually fix governance, create jobs, and boost a little bit the economy. And they didn't even use that. They couldn't make a decision on what criteria they would use in order to call for proposals, in order to have people use this money, create the jobs, and fix governance, and do some anti-corruption work. So for 4.5 years, they were just sitting on this. And the Ministry of Finance, the national coordinator, were blaming each other for not doing enough. And Siemens was sitting back because actually there was a clause in the agreement saying that this has to be spent in 5 years. Otherwise, we're taking it back. Right? So now they have another parliamentary committee revisiting the Siemens case, and they're going to take a look at this. We'll see what they will find. Okay, we have new laws. We have special procedures. We created the national coordinator in 2012. He got abolished. As soon as I came in, we have a Minister of State for combating corruption. The defense scandals, the Ministry of Defense is handling those. And at the same time, we have the Minister of State, used to be actually a prosecutor who was dealing with tax evasion and money laundering. So he does know about these things, and hopefully something will come out of it. But I'm, as they say, cautiously optimistic with the emphasis on caution, right? On what can be done even now. Now, internationally, we have seen all kinds of momentum, conventions. You know, especially we started with the Americans, but we had the European Union, we had the UN Convention Against Corruption. Those are ratified, and the OECD, those are ratified by Greece. And we have other standards, extraterritorially applied American or British laws. We have all kinds of guidelines, all kinds of principles, all kinds of statements from private sector or NGO or international organizations on how to fix this, both for companies and government. And the practice is actually measurable when you see the results, both with respect to ethics and compliance in companies, again, not only in Greece, but also in government. The problems that we see universally is that, again, the appearance of applying the law and doing something about corruption is given when someone is prosecuted. But when you keep prosecuting your political opponents, you're actually undermining democracy rather than promoting it. And this is a pattern that we have seen in many countries. Then what you have is also going after the low-hanging fruit. You catch a co-op, you catch a customs official, you set an example, and you send them for many years to prison, and then you do not do anything about the top. Well, we have a former minister in prison, and the trial, another one is going on right now. But that is the exception that confirms the rule. We do not have prosecution of high-level officials in Greece. So the you have bureaucracy, you have new laws, you have complexity added to this. Okay, we're throwing new law at the problem, new regulations, new bureaucracies, and all the criteria that we use instead of looking at outcomes, we're looking at outputs. Do you have this law? It's a checklist. Do you have this law? Do you have a person doing this? Check. Well done. Complying. And that is where the controls, evaluations, and assessments stop. And if those who are window dressing and playing theater are not addressed, we think that we're succeeding when we're failing. Because the question is this working? Is it making a difference? Is there any change? Is there less compliance? Is there value added in procurement, relations, public sector? Are more people prosecuted? Is better civil society participation? Are people feeling better about this? Is the quality of life increased? Those are the outcomes. We're not having the laws for the sake of laws. I'm a lawyer, but I can tell you that having too many lawyers involved in this process is actually a negative. So these are the problems that we see all over the world. And here are the similar kind of graphics for Greece that the World Bank has. Okay, so you can see that we're not going anywhere. I mean, these are the signs of a dead patient. It's not moving. Okay, so what do we need to do about all this? It's similar with Sub-Sahara. In Sub-Sahara, I use that example because friends of mine have actually spent. We have all kinds of development, USAID type of organizations, spending tons of time, all kinds of experts, private consulting companies that are going there. And what are they doing? Sub-Saharan Africa is actually doing worse now after all this, with respect to control of corruption, rule of law, or accountability, or anything for that matter, right? So it's money wasted. That's one metric. Another metric is perceptions. Perceptions are also going down. Global integrity, another metric. They're finding that, yeah, they do have laws. They've got the consultants who, do off-the-shelf models they have, but they're not implementing. They have someone hitting flies, pretending that he's fighting, illicit enrichment and money laundering, right? So parts of the problem are the roots of corruption problems are not addressed. This is why you need also the social science, right? That's that part of my brain that kicks in here. Why are we having these problems? Where are they coming from? What are the contributing factors? Situational, individual, collective, organizational. We need to take a look, right? Easily, we just say some bad apples, bad people, corrupt leaders. Get rid of those, problem solved. That's not the answer. You need to look at the system, okay? And very often we have Trojan horses. We put in place people who are supposed to be in charge of anti-corruption or anti-corruption entities, and the same people are corrupt to the bone. That's not the way to change society. There has to be some accountability, openness, and auditing of the people who are participating, right? This is where technology actually can help, because if you turn the lights on in areas where you have shadowy, shady kind of transactions that are beyond the public eye, and we need to bring them up to the public eye. The absence of multi-stakeholder approaches. Here's the recipe for sustainable integrity, okay? You need, and this is where you need some scientific work as well. You need some research to get data. You cannot come up out of thin air with theories and explanations without cases and in-depth analysis of both statistical and qualitative kind of analysis. Then you need to have the machines in place. You need to change the government. I will give you an example of what we have in place in Greece on anti-corruption on them. And you have to have engaged citizens. You can't do that from the top. You gotta have the population involved in this. And population also means private sector, academia, NGOs, the works, right? And in order to do that, you need a diagnostic. No off-the-shelf solutions. Absolutely the resources that are necessary. You're going to make them available, okay? And you need the strategic approach. You can't do that. Why do you need a strategy? In Greece, the problems that we're talking about here will not be solved overnight. We need a couple of generations, at least. So if you have this long-term project, you have to have an ultimate goal where you want to get, a vision. But you gotta work for the meantime as well. Politicians have a short memory and interest. They need to get reelected next, whatever time frame they're gonna have. People are gonna lose hope unless they see some results. So you have the necessity of producing medium and short-term results. So you want to have some projects, small steps, small victories to build momentum, to show that you're on the right track. But you need the strategy to frame them so that these steps are actually stepping stones to work. They're instrumental, they're conducive to the attainment of the long-term goals, where you set that vision. But you need to involve everyone so that that buy in so that they are involved. They have a stake in the success of this, and we do not go back to the drawing board every time the government changes. Because every time we just, it's literally, you have a sinking Titanic and people moving chairs around or bringing in chairs from another ship. That's not going to solve the problem. We are sinking, right? So, and the other thing is not over-promising and under-delivering. I mean, you have to manage expectations, whatever public policy you have in place. You have to say what achievable, pragmatic goals you set and meet them. And that's why you need performance indicators. It's not here, it's in another one. Another slide, right? You need performance indicator. You say, this is how we measure progress. This is an assessment tool. Performance indicators. Key performance indicators. Everybody. I mean, this is a scalable kind of project. Depending on what unit of analysis you have, it can be a department, it can be a city, it can be no matter here, a province, it can be the whole country, it could be a sector of the economy. You have an overall strategy, and you want to have performance indicators for the overall project. But you can actually go to tax offices, you can go to customs agencies, you can go to courts, you can go to anything. And you say, here is how we are closing the gap, we're moving towards our goals, or this is where we are stuck and we need to pay attention, this is where we're going backward, and hey, red flag, let's do something about it. And incidentally, that will give you red flags and vulnerabilities analysis for amending and adjusting your strategy as you go. You're not going to get it right the first time anyway. You always have to have this revisions on a regular basis. That's what the performance indicators help you do. But you also have to actually find examples of leadership, integrity. Show the map. Find good examples. Give people some hope that there are persons of integrity, people who are able and willing to participate, do the job, give them support. Sometimes all they need is a tap on the shoulder or recognition, rather than having, special private security to help them avoid a bomb in case, the people that they gave away the reported about go after them. There are security issues because of the ingrained sort of problems that we have with it. I'm going to skip everything else that I have here because I just want to give you one illustration of the problem of context. Okay? So what you see here is a car that is mistreated, right? It is run down. It is not supposed to have so many people, so they obviously are breaking a good traffic law rule that says you don't have that many people on. Now here's the context. These people are coming from a village that has no jobs, no public transportation, and they cannot afford to have their own car to go from their residence to the workplace so they can bring home the bacon or vegetables. Right? So this is their survival kit. Can you blame them for getting on the one pickup truck available in the village that takes them to the workplace and keeps the livelihood going, keeps the community going? The cop who's not giving a traffic violation ticket is not because he is corrupt and he's turning a blind eye, it's because he's sympathetic, because he understands. So you can have, here's an example of a good law. Makes perfect sense. It's a bad way. You can't maintain a car like this. But is this village ready for this law? And let me apply this to a contemporary Greece. Who's going to blame me if I give a little envelope with money to the doctor in order for my daughter who is dying to get some medical attention? It's the equivalent of the Jew bribing his way out of a concentration camp, or someone in Rwanda protecting someone from genocide. Breaking a bad law, breaking a law that can't be applied practically, is actually ethical. That's the ethical thing to do for this guy. So when we have these off-the-shelf applications, they come in without any understanding of the local context. You can't have integrity with empty stomach, guys. You got to fix those problems. These are the strategic things. These are things that have to be done progressively, step-by-step thinking, and also having an honest dialogue with the constituents and those who are coming from outside, bringing those off-the-shelf requirements. But you have a Greek government that is completely paralyzed, with everything completely fragmented, and no articulated response and defense against those requirements that come through the Troika and other mechanisms, saying you're going to get money if you do this, that, and that, the other. And all this saying, oh my God, it doesn't make sense. Well, tell them what does. Figure it out. Right? This is where we fall down. This is where we have the problems. I'll skip right to the end. Let me give you an example of how many institutions we have in the Greek government right now dealing with corruption. Okay, here are the top. Here are the more specialized bodies, special commissions, special services, directorates, and offices, and that continues, and that continues. And what are you going to do with this? I mean, it's a small country, and we have all these people in anti-corruption. Who's doing the job? They're getting in each other's way. Some rationalization is actually good. There's room for improvement. Right? You can avoid, we don't have time for the metrics and so on. Here are some, diversity that you have, according to Transparency International and total corruption in the public sector, as well as the private, is going down. After all, if you don't have any money, how are you going to bribe anybody? But not the case with hospitals. And hospitals' private is going up. So the problem there is growth. Right? Then you look at geographic location. In some parts of Greece, it's a bigger problem than in others. So there's a lot of diversity even in a small place like Greece. That you need to pay attention to, right? So instead of drilling holes to the water, and here are examples. Here's an example of how you misunderstand progress. So the blue line is revenue. So you can have more revenues, but the disparity between the red and the green lines is the difference between pending cases and closed cases. So yes, you're collecting more money, but you're doing a worse job with handling all the evidence and the data that you have to collect even more. So it's not only what you've done, but what you could have done and didn't that matters in this, right? And you have to deal with this, man. This is not a way of doing tax collection. All right? So that is a bit of a problem. Or making a decision and requiring, how many is it, 34 signatures for a simple change in the ministry, right? That's bureaucracy. It makes no sense. So basically, these are the things. Genuine political will at the top, not just statements. Do it. Risk assessment, capacity assessment. Risk assessment tells you what needs to be done and what you can do with existing resources. That's the capacity assessment. Then you have to bring in educators, media, civil society, private sector, everybody in for strategic planning. Okay? Simplify law and procedures, rationalize the government. Collective actions is where, and I can tell you that I was last year at the Greek Parliament, and on that occasion I was able to meet with different sectors of the economy in Greece. They are ready for collective actions beyond and even without the government. Let's come together, come up with principles with self-regulation. We are going to say that these are the guiding conduct norms for our industry in Greece. They are ready for this. Some coordination is necessary. The expectations and the performance indicators are there, adjustments, and this is the way to build gradually legitimacy, credibility, momentum, sustainable changes. That is what we need in Greece. So we can work on this, or we can fight corruption in Greece the way that the penguins do it. So this is anti-corruption in Greece right now. Thank you so much. Sure. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Nico. Uh, he told us a lot of things about what is the situation, but I don't think I heard from you maybe the one thing that I should remember tomorrow of what needs to be done. You were very diffuse, if you permit me to say, and Nikos and I know each other quite well, so that's why I'm taking the liberty. What is one thing that you want me to remember tomorrow of the single most important action item? Let me lower myself to the position of being the prime minister, and you are my minister of corruption. What one thing you would like?
That would have been the first step, actually.
But what would you do? What's the first step that needs to be done? Because the first step is to have an independent judiciary, which we do not have in Greece.
The first step is to do the diagnosis. The first step is to know what the problem is.
The patient is sick, we know it, and we've seen it every time we're there. Diagnostic is not.
What I gave you is the newspaper from here, the case from there. You need something systematic. You want to prioritize. You're not going to be able to do everything at once. The basic thing, the basic argument is the need for a strategy. You cannot come up with a strategy with anecdotes. You need a strategy with some evidence on what are the top problems and the ones that require immediate attention. And what resources do you currently have to deal with? Then you have the gap analysis, the assessment of needs, right? And you say, these are the things that I don't have. You have those institutions from outside who say, how can we help you? You got to be able to have an answer to that. We don't have an answer right now. We have the money, we buy scanners for the customers. We have that money, we give some money for students to get scholarships. These are good things, but they are not strategic. Okay, the strategic thing is come up with a plan. You cannot have a plan without a risk assessment, capacity assessment, and multi-stakeholder coming together. I mean, today's technologies make it possible actually to have town meetings in a virtual way. You know, we get together to the square in order to have a panigiri or to have a dance, to have a, let's get together and talk about those kind of things. These matter to people, right? So if you have a plan, make sure that it is a plan that everyone sees their part in it, not something that is top down. It will take several months to come up with that, but how many years do we have having to answer the accusation that you haven't done the reforms that we asked? Right? At some point, we need to do that.
Love your presentation. Great information, and being an outsider, not being in Greece, but Canadian born in Greece, really captured the things that we see are problematic. So excellent. But my surprise, and I asked you this question, is there's awareness. You know, their eyes wide open in terms of what the key issues are. Why hasn't the Korean community, which are known to be, vocal, which are known to be the toward these issues, why hasn't the groundswell started?
Again, because we do not have an articulated statement of the problem. Corruption to many is actually a solution to their individual problems. I paid the bribe, my kid got operated on. I paid a bribe, I got a job. So to a lot of people, when you see it in a fragmented way, corruption is an answer to the problems they have. And the doctors that you ask them, if you go to a work, they will tell you there that I had to take this because the salary the state is paying me now to work only on their hospital is not enough to feed my family.
Well, that's a problem.
It is a problem.
That argument is a problem.
Well, but you have to take those things into account. You cannot ignore them.
Doctors, this is what you don't understand. For doctors, for example, because I'm a doctor.
Okay.
Yeah, because for example, lawyers in Greece, they don't get any receipts when they are in and you don't mention that. Do you know that there is a law actually for lawyers in Greece that when you do go to the court and you have a case, you don't get any receipt? So you don't say that, but you say about doctors. So doctors, they're not evaluated in Greece, which means actually that we have plenty of doctors from all over the world that in other countries, they may not have been ever doctors, and some of them, they're very good ones. But the salary actually is very low.
Exactly.
So when you have a very low salary, but you love your family and you want to stay there, actually, you're saying actually, if I have Filipino, I will see that patient, of course. But some people, especially those ones that they have studied so many years there, so many
I
years
don't
since
agree
they
with
study
you.
medicine,
It is
then
not only
they
the
say that,
doctors.
I can't leave my family, because actually, the actual government has let me like that, with no salary.
That's why I was saying